Welcome to episode 50, the big 5-0 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast for Nick and Blaze. This week, we go through everything that happened in round one, from the close games to the upsets to the blowouts. We also reveal the secret that we've been keeping for a couple of weeks from you that has something to do with this weekend that we are very much looking forward to sharing. And we also preview round two, which is obviously, coming up this week. So let's jump straight into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yeah, as I said, I sort of skipped out on Saturday's games for better or for worse to go to Lookout Festival over the weekend. So I'm a bit burnt actually. I've got some possible secret / not secret inside information news because I noticed on Sunday.
How
Harley
secret
Reid
/
was
not so
quite
secret?
unburnt.
That information.
So there was a lot of Harley Reid looking people at Lookout Festival, so he may have been there. I don't want to start rumors.
There's a possible chance. I mean, they probably wouldn't have trained Saturday because they would have trained Friday. So there's a fair chance.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it got home at a reasonable time, didn't drink anything. I mean, could be able to. But yeah, as I said, yeah, I had an okay time. And yeah, that's it. Got into the footy. It was exciting. A few tears were shed, especially as I checked my phone on the way home after all the games had concluded. But there's still plenty of rounds of football. If your team lost, there's plenty of optimism still. We'll try and boost you up this week with the podcast. But yeah, how are you, Blazy?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Still very, very happy with Thursday night's performance, which we will talk about momentarily. No one was expecting that, except for apparently Starks in our tipping competition. Like, how do you expect that? My word. I'm still upset that I didn't put a cheeky bet on, like I said I would, because I would have made some big bucks from that game. But oh well. But otherwise, it's been a week. Just trying to keep busy. This week is very busy. And do we wanna reveal why?
Yeah, sure.
So we've been hired. Actually, I'm going to start by showing off a photo from the very last game that we went to together. So this was taken in 2019 in May. May of 2019.
Yeah.
Us with a friend. I've hidden them for privacy purposes. I didn't ask to use this photo. So that's why they're hidden. But this is us outside of Optus Stadium in 2019, where we saw Fremantle play Richmond. Richmond won, which was great. We won. I remember.
I've forgotten, but I'll believe you. They were pretty mid back then. I can't remember.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. They were fairly mid back then. I remember the game specifically because St Kilda also got injured that game, and he was out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I remember talking about that.
But I mean, hey, we still won the premiership that year. I was very happy.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring this up is because it was the last game that we went together, which was almost 6 years ago now. It's crazy how time flies. But we are both happy to reveal that we will both be at the Port Adelaide v Richmond game at the Adelaide Oval this Saturday. We are extremely excited to actually see a game together again.
Yeah, because unfortunately the last time we were together, we were planning to go to Adelaide Oval. It wasn't actually for a Port game. It was, I forgot who it was. Adelaide versus St Kilda?
It might have been. I can't remember.
But yeah, we had a bit of a COVID break in our shared cabin. So that was put on the back burner. I didn't have it at the time, but I ended up getting it. So I'm very glad that I didn't go. But yeah, so yeah, now we're like, okay. I wouldn't say we have like a huge mountain of spare cash, but we had like enough to go, yeah, we could probably go for a little in-between trip to our two teams. And yeah, it'll be my first experience at Adelaide Oval. I'm wearing the members too because
I think this is my third experience at Adelaide Oval.
Yeah.
Which I'm looking forward to.
I'm taking you under my wing. I'm taking you under my wing to the wings, so you'll get a different experience this time.
Yeah, because I think the last time I sat was like up in the stand, but like in like sort of the right pocket. So it's been.
Oh yeah.
Like I was like way up there. So I think that's the last time I was there, which is a couple of years back now. But yeah, we're very much looking forward to it. However, that does make my week extremely busy because I also have the Game Expo coming up on the Sunday. So I'm flying out to Adelaide Friday night. And then I come back Saturday night, or I can be prepared for the Game Expo because I'm part of a broadcasting team for the Marvel Rivals LAN tournament. I'm very, very excited to. It's a $5,000 prize pool. I discovered the other day, which is very exciting for all of our players. And we're looking forward to putting on a good show. If you've seen any of my live streams recently, it's part of what I've been up to. Part of the other productions I've been involved in. Yeah, that's going to be really cool. So my week is going to be extremely busy.
Yeah.
On top of
So
looking after notes and stuff for at least Thursday, Friday for the podcast, but we'll see otherwise.
yeah, we'll figure out something. Like, we're going to treat this as like a tiny bit of a holiday, but we'll still get you the podcast next week. It just might be some matches we pay a bit less attention to. But yeah, as I said, should be good. I'm personally heading in on Thursday, only because I accidentally booked my ticket on Thursday instead of Friday for some unknown reason. And then I'm heading out on Sunday. Sunday night though, so I get to spend a couple of days in Adelaide. Nice. I reckon it's a nice town to spend a day in. I might go to the gardens again, have a walk around, maybe even go to the ground again. Maybe look at the there's a museum in Adelaide Oval, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's
So-
like the sports museum, like there is in the MCG, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. So yeah, I might check that out afterwards. But yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I'll just be looking to enjoy the weekend, and as I said, someone that I'm looking forward to seeing again. It'll be good to bring the coast together again. We'll just be coast podcasts for
Yeah, it won't be coast to
the
coast
weekend
anymore.
of next week.
Not the east or west.
Yeah.
It'll be the central. Oh, actually, yeah, it's technically the central
Coast podcast, maybe. Yeah,
We'll rename for one episode, sure.
yeah. I can't be bothered updating the graphic.
Yeah, it's too much effort right now. Shall we?
Yeah.
Shall we jump into it with the first game?
You're keen, aren't we?
Of course I am. So if you're
Ah.
if you're listening on the Spotify version, it is Richmond versus Carlton, the Thursday night opening clash of round 1, and the scores were 13-4-82 to 9-15-69.
In favour of Richmond, of course.
Absolutely.
Big upset. Big upset.
No
I
one
wrote
saw this coming.
daggering. Because yeah, as you know, well, if you didn't catch up the game or you only caught the final scoreline, the Tigers were actually down 41 points with a scoreline of 7-8. This was about, I think, halfway through the second quarter.
7-48.
And-
And yeah, it was about halfway through the second.
Yeah, 7-48. Sorry. Yeah, and as I said, it was like looking fairly academic for Carlton. They dominated territory stat, got a lot of contested possessions, and were fairly decent with their 4-50 conversion. And then afterwards, it was pretty much the worst case scenario. They would only kick 2 more goals for the rest of the game to Richmond's 12, as they fought tooth and nail to scrap a win against an opponent that was unfortunately just looking as turnover prone as the Young Tigers. Because, while Richmond did produce a lot of turnovers, Carlton weren't too far off the pace. Especially when some of those turnovers created, Richmond will get a turnover, Carlton would want to look to score, and they'll just turn the ball over again.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as I said, it was one of those things where, because Richmond was so willing to hunt, never gave up on the contest, it allowed them to get back into the game. Because again, early on, stoppage and turnover game, Carlton were just slingshotting the ball back into their attack. It was very fast paced. Richmond sort of got caught on the hop, especially their defense, who I actually thought overall were fairly good. It was just early on in the ones on turnovers that they were starting to get, I would say, only a tiny bit exposed 1v1. I'd actually say it's one of the better defensive. Like, if I was ranking like top 8 defensive performances, Richmond would probably.
Well, I've been saying it the whole time, but if you look at our completely fit team, we have a really solid defense. We just don't have the fit players or the experience to really put it all together right now.
Yeah. So Richmond, as I said, defending looked really good in forward normal entries. As I said, they got 10 opposition 50 intercept marks to Carlton's 3. So that's marking in your defensive 50 intercept. So, as I said, there was a lot of Carlton's ball use that were just going to Richmond players. And yeah, as I said, Richmond didn't have too much trouble defending those normal entries. So, as I said, they were sort of wasting their forward half dominance. And eventually, the damn wall just broke. And all that effort of Richmond, trying to break through, because they weren't ever polished the whole night. They just found enough chains. At the start, they weren't really getting many chains that would go all the way through to attack. But when the game opened up near the second half, the game just broke open and they found their way. And it was just very impressive, especially, I think also a sign of evolution is they got the lead back in that third quarter. You know what I mean? Like some teams, they'll be pushing it a bit late.
Technically not, because we tied at the end of the third quarter.
Sorry, tied in the... You know what I mean, Blazy. Don't get pedantic when I'm gassing up the Tigers. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like sometimes when you're a young team and you like get that draw level and it's like 10 minutes to go, then the pressure just builds too much. If you can get that early, you know what I mean? Like it's such a big difference. And I think the other thing, and this shows where maybe people were a bit harsh on Richmond because, they're all talking about the youngsters. But when you look at this game, it wasn't just the raw rookies that stood up because you'll get to them because the kids were fantastic this game. But some of the 4 to 6 year players like Ross, Dow, Mansell, Miller, Hopper, I thought were a real delight because
Absolutely.
I don't think they would have won that game without him because they provided enough.
Jack Ross was by far best on ground. I think Thompson Dow, that was his best game for us ever. I think that's the best performance I've ever seen from him. Ryan Mansell, he gives his all every week. He had a nasty hit, I think, in the third quarter that he struggled to get up from. Or it might have been second quarter that he struggled to get up from. But he managed to come back onto the field and outperform. And yeah, the longer that Hopper and Taranto are in our system, I think they both look like really, really good, especially now that we have like that new game plan for them to fit into.
Yeah. And also, as I said, Ben Miller in defense as well.
Oh, 100%. Especially really with solid. Jacob Blight, who we picked up in last year's mid-season. Yeah. They look so good together.
Exactly, you know what I mean? So, again, it's just, Carlton, they came into this game with sort of a makeshift forward line, I would say. But really, their team defense was significantly worse than the Tigers. When you saw some of the Tigers' goals, and I've actually written it here, Tigers got 6 goals to 1 from inside 20 meters from goals. So when you got a young team, you know what I mean? They just let the door open for them. Because, when you're inside 20, like, you may miss 1 out of, 50 or something. You know what I mean? Well, okay, maybe not that easy, but they were pretty straightforward. They were like the Joe the Goose type goals for at least maybe 3 or 4 of them. But you know what I mean? So it just allowed it to be easy because in reality, like stepping back a bit, reining it in a tiny bit, the Tigers still only got 40 inside 50s.
Yes.
Which was under what they averaged in 2024. So technically, I'm not saying they took a step backwards, but you know what I mean? Like, they got a lot of scoring that they, but it was still from very limited entries. So this was a game.
There's another game, I think one of the games that happened on Sunday, there was something very similar, where they had less inside 50s than another team, but it was a Hawthorn game. I think it was the Hawthorn game, where Essendon had more inside 50s, but Hawthorn had just a lot more accurate.
I think it was a bit different the way the games play, but we'll talk about a bit of difference when that game comes up next. But as I said, like this game, it did. I think part of the reason why Richmond won was still a bit Carlton playing. I hate to say it like that badly, but they were pretty bad.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. They did look dreadful in that second half.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, this is the thing where I think it's so important to where, when you're Richmond, when you're Adam Uze, and I thought they did this last year. Like, again, just to bring that effort into every game, so in case something like this happens, they get that early win. And last year, they just didn't have enough to run out the game.
Yeah.
Whereas I think this game is a reward from a lot of unrewarded effort from last year.
Agreed.
So
I think as much as everyone kind of went into this season saying it doesn't matter if we get any wins or not. It's just about getting this experience, getting that development into the players. Let them gel, let them work together more, and just see if our system can work. But the fact that we got a win right off the bat, that's just icing on the cake for all the preseason work and the work from last season that they developed on.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of agree, but I think if you're ever putting in a system, you have to believe, like internally, you have to believe that your system's going to win you a game.
Oh, 100%.
So you know what I mean? Like
You just don't
like
know
the
when
fans,
it's gonna happen, is the thing.
yeah, exactly. You know, like the fans, you know, as I said, the Richmond fans took a great assault, and you know that was absolutely fair. But I think internally, I definitely think that there is a bit of belief there, and you know, again, I think it's also coming from why the kids from game one immediately turned it on for the Tigers.
Absolutely. Speaking of, it's my turn to jump into all of the players that I wanted to highlight for this game. So we'll start with the best on ground, Jack Ross. He kicked 2 goals from 28 touches, 25 of them effective, which equates to 82.1% efficiency. 11 contested possessions, 5 marks, 6 inside 50, 7 clearances, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 10 grab ball gets, and 591 meters gained. Ben Miller was a stable pillar in defense, as we mentioned before. He finished with 13 touches, 11 of them effective, equating to 84.6% efficiency. 7 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 6 marks with 3 of them contested and 4 of them intercepts. 6 more percenters, 4 spoils, 333 meters gained, and 100% time on ground. And as you put, just as a little extra note, 6 defensive one-on-one contests and only successful and only 1 loss.
Yes. Sorry, so they had 6 defensive one-on-ones overall, and one of them was the
And
loss.
so we went
So
5-1.
5 wins, if you want to put it on a positive way.
Very successful. He's gotten a lot better in his one-on-one efforts. I think he learned really well under Grimes.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, yeah, you see Ben Miller was targeted that night and stood tall, so...
100%. Yeah, there were a lot of moments I watched, and a lot of moments in attack and a lot of moments in defense where they just got, like him and Lynch both kind of ended up in 2-on-1 situations, but they both managed to do fairly well, like under that pressure.
Yeah,
and then third-year player Seth Campbell, the one that kicked the sealer and did the whole cartwheel somersault at the end, which was very fun for everyone. He put on immense pressure, collecting 8 disposals with 7 of them effective at 87.5% efficiency, 7 tackles with 2 of them inside 50, 23 pressure acts, and 2 ground ball gets, with 1 of them being inside 50. Then I want to shout out, obviously, the debutants, Luke Traynor, Harry Armstrong, and the rising star, as I managed to find out just a moment ago, number 1 draft pick, Sam Lawler, who also kicked 2 goals on debut, for playing incredibly well in a marquee game.
And I appreciate that because I only probably learned now that his name's pronounced Lawler.
Yeah, I only learned it from the broadcast.
So well.
Everyone thought it was Laylaw, but yeah, it's Lawler.
Yeah, I think he did an interview before the game, confirming that. So, yeah, absolutely, very deserved. A lot of people were saying another player coming into the game, but I think he was just so important for a lot of their movement. You know what I mean? It was just... You wouldn't pick him as a debut player. And you know, like, I know...
Everyone keeps comparing him to, the next coming of Jesus, the next Dusty. But exactly. There is definitely some kind of... He plays a very similar way. He's a very similar build. But I think he's going to be a star in his own right. It'll just take, obviously, time to get there.
And honestly, I know they put that position, but it looks like he's a bit more... distribution focused than Dusty was.
Yeah.
And I know Dusty was, but you know what? Dusty was select moments, very kick heavy. Where I think Sam Laylaw, he's just, is slightly big and is smart. As I said, his positioning was pretty good all day. He wasn't getting lost in the contest. He wasn't getting too sucked in, wasn't getting too sucked out. Fairly responsible all night. As I said, can't sing his praises enough.
Yeah, I was very, very impressed with all 3 of them. Although Harry Armstrong was, like, in terms of stats, he was the worst rated out of the 3. But I think the pressure that he put on just in the overall game was immense. Same with everyone else. It was very, very impressive to see.
Yeah, and plus, as I said, Richmond didn't really have that many entries. So for a young Toll, it was a pretty hard assignment. And, still, I think he took a mark inside 50. I vaguely remember him doing something
Yeah,
in there. So
he definitely had some action, which was, it's always good.
yeah,
Anyway, Carlton players that I want to highlight because again they had a decent first half, and they did kind of fall off. But Captain Patrick Cripps, as per normal, was
mm,
always at his best. 32 touches with 23 of them effective, 71.9% accuracy. There is a fair chance he'll get a Brownlow vote out of this game because that's just how it goes. Um,
probably.
15 contested possessions, 9 clearances. He kicked a behind at some point. 2 goal assists, 9 score involvements, 5 tackles, 13 pressure acts, and 5 ground ball gets. Jack Silvani, he played his first AFL game in over 600 days. He was absolutely electric. He kicked 1-1 and collected 16 disposals, 5 contested possessions, 8 marks, 6 score involvements, 11 pressure acts, and 8 spoils. And then debutant Lucas Camporelli played a solid game, finishing with 20 touches with 10 of them effective at 50% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 5 tackles, 13 pressure acts, 4 ground ball gets, and 3 spoils.
Yeah, he was also very good on debut. You know, sort of. I think it was a bit more into the contest in the first half. I wouldn't say faded out, but you know what I mean. As I said, I think the Tigers just cleaned up a bit on outside movement, especially after that first half. Not too many players on the Carlton wing were that standout. So, yeah, as I said, I thought he was fairly good.
Yeah,
Also, I
100%.
do want to mention,
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't mention either of them, and I thought it was like one of the standouts of this game, the rock battle between Tom De Koning and Nan
It
Curtis.
was a
And it
very good rock
just,
battle.
yeah, and it just sort of showed like Nan Curtis, like, he still had like a lot of hit outs. He was still doing fairly well. But you know what I mean? Like, at times it seemed like some of De Koning's tap were like breaking them open, and you know he would be a point of difference, you know, for the game, and maybe even the difference maker in terms of, you know, was pretty a tight contest. I know the Blues sort of fell away late, but in terms of scoring, you know, and all that sort of thing, like both teams had enough opportunities.
Mm.
And then Dan Curvis just anywhere around the ground, whenever you needed, occasionally in defense, occasionally in attack, it would just pop up and do something very useful. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it's so important to have a tap ruckman that can dominate. But, you know, they have a bad matchup, you know, maybe it's not favouring them. And I'm not even sure how the hitouts exactly went. I think they were fairly
They were
even.
fairly even when I checked off memory.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So Nate got 35, De Koning got 30. I think some of De Koning's ones led a bit more to you know, stoppage based goals or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, as I said, Nate Curvis, you know, just his ability to run out through the game. And, you know, you joke about Nate the Tank, but really, like, I think that's what separated that from his early career into like now. And, you know, he's just a full body runner. He's a big unit. He's hard to move in a marking contest. And as I said, he's just so useful.
And he has the tank to be able to run out games as well.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't always need. Well, I mean, it always does. It's always good for Rux to have a rest, but he doesn't always really need that cover, and that's why he was so good at being a solo ruck for so long.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, that was part of the reason why Sordo was let go and all that stuff happening with Port. But you know, it's very good because, you know, as much as you can say things are like stripped out of Richmond, how everything gone, like they still have a bit of identity there.
Yeah.
And it's good to see, again, as I mentioned before, those 4 to 6 year players step up a bit because that's what they needed. Like for them not to be terrible, they're going to need more Jack Ross, Mansell, all those sort of players' performances. Ben Miller, I think he's only just 4 year player, so he's still young.
Yeah, he's like 4 or 5 year. I'm pretty sure. Hugo
Yeah.
Ralsmith is probably the biggest one out of that group that we were missing.
Yeah, that too. When he comes back, that will be very
speaking of
handy.
wing players, though, I want to give a brief shout out just before we switch over to the next game to Camden McIntosh, because instead of playing his normal wing role, he played a tagging role on Cripps, and whilst he let
Headband time.
and it wasn't necessarily like a hard tagging role like Toby Bedford kind of does. It was more just a pressure role to nullify Cripps's effectiveness. And for the most part, especially in that second half, I think he did fairly well.
Yeah, I think you can normally tell when Cripps gets tagged because he's just too. I think his name as a player like is too good to get the hard tag.
Yeah, he's like
if you can force him
much.
to handball rather than kick, it limits Carlton's effectiveness. Because if Patrick Cripps is kicking the ball, like, he's probably broken free from a contest.
Yeah.
Like, that's the main way he gets his kicks. Sometimes in transition, but, normally you see Chera, maybe Sam Walsh take more of that sort of role.
Yes.
So, you limit by handball, you make someone else make the tough kick. It limits what he can do. And obviously he's really good. He still had a fantastic game. But yeah, as I said, what McIntosh did and still provide a bit on his own way. It was very handy. He still got 4 clearances as well himself. Was it 16 possessions? So it wasn't a full tag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it was still
just a pressure
offensive
roll,
generation. 304 meters gained as well, which is very healthy. So.
And then just last on the list is the injury front. Jacob Light was subbed out in the third quarter, I believe, for groin tightness. I don't think it was anything major, thankfully, so he should be all right to go for this upcoming week. But yeah, it was a little bit scary subbing him out for Songsi in like the third quarter, because it's hard to sub in, sub out a tall defender for like a small midfielder.
Yeah. So it was, they did cover fairly well, because Carlton still had a few entries in that last. Like, it wasn't a Richmond domination. So, as I said, there's a lot to say, not just of the players, but of the structure, especially in that back half.
Yeah. All right. Shall we jump over to our next game?
Yeah. So Hawthorn and Essendon, a pretty decent game at the MCG. I think a few people were expecting Essendon to get maybe blown out a bit, but I think they held their head up reasonably well. It was 79-111 to 12-13-85. And again, despite, a chunk of inside 50s, as you mentioned before, Essendon had about 20 more inside 50s, I think,
believe
than
that's
Hawthorn.
correct. Yeah.
And a respectable amount of possessions. The Dons weren't able to consistently break the Hawks' defense, while the Dons' own defense sort of struggled against the undersized Hawks, as they still were able to get plenty of marks and plenty of set shots against the Dons side, who sort of had to struggle without Jordan Ridley, who was concussed in the second quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, another slight injury concern for him. But yeah, as I said, I sort of think this was a fairly simple game, so I've kept it a bit brief here, but I think Hawthorn almost had a bit of free reign once the ball was able to get to their outside.
Mm-hmm.
With their inside users, probably sans Nash, being held reasonably quiet. Like, the Dons' inside midfield unit was still very good, but it didn't quite convert into too much score for Essendon. Especially when you just even take the forward half of the ground. They had a lot of score, but they were only 1-8 from forward half scoring chains, which sort of was what kept them out of it, because they had a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
They could keep the ball themselves, but they just weren't converting. And, as I said, it's sort of... I will say this, like, I don't think the Hawks defense is still quite where they want it, but it's still looking fairly threatening at the same time, like, just in terms of pure size and all that sort of thing. It's not impenetrable. They're giving up a lot at ground level, but, it's still going to be fairly hard to mark against, Scrimshaw. Well, maybe after the few weeks, if his suspension stays, he won't be there, but Frost,
Barras, Battle,
Hardwick, Battle, and I was thinking Weddle.
Yeah, Weddle's very good down there.
Stuck on the Weddle.
Well, you can't have Warple because Warple's out, so it's got to be Weddle.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, so Essendon just struggled a bit. Carl Langford also went down after the half. He scored. It was a very Langford 2 goals. You know what I mean? Like, he was very quiet, and then all of a sudden he kicks 2. So yeah, as I said, so I think Essendon. I think one of the best things for them is some of their back half movement, because I think they were very similar with the Hawks to score from their back half. And, they did lock the ball in their forward half. So in terms of like this game, like this was a winning play start. It just wasn't quite polished enough in that first game. Again, maybe you even put it to the Hawks having that game the week before. That might have made things, a bit more interesting if it was just a pure, 1v1, sorry, like a round one pure sort of matchup.
Yeah.
But, there was a lot of positive signs, I think. And as for Hawthorn, it shows the versatility for them. Like, again, you still got that brilliant halfback user, like, Carl Amon. Again, probably one of the best players on the ground, distributing from the halfback. You got Connor McDonald, Dylan Moore, both on the wing, Josh Ward as well. And again, Nick Watson, is just creeps up a bit, provides a bit of pressure up the ground. But, if he's not getting the ball, he just goes deeper, puts a lot of pressure, gets the score off stoppage. And, as I said, very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, as I said, I think for Essendon, it's not really too much I want to say, like in terms of, I think it was just one of those things where, they could probably have been a tiny bit better, especially from the clearance, get a bit more from that. But again, they're still working with a fairly new forward line. It's going to take a few weeks. And I still think 12-13-85 is probably a success for them. Again, against a fairly, at least preseason wise, highly rated Hawthorn defense.
Yeah, like on paper, and now that we've seen it in action, the Hawthorn defense is easily top 5 defense in the league right now. Whether it will still be a top 5 defense, as the season goes on, but currently as it stands, it is one of the best.
I didn't say. No, I disagree. It depends. Like on paper, I could see how you could say that, but I don't think out of these two games, I don't think it's fully fleshed. Like it could grow into it, but I still think they need to check on ground level, and there might be a few teams that might cause them a few headaches, but I'm not exactly sure what their first round lineups are. So we'll just see. It might just be that they sort of just deal with it on the fly. Like as long as you're winning, it doesn't really matter. Like I know I'm being a bit picky here, but
true. The 4 points is the 4 points.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why important. Like someone like Sicily, I think is very important as well because I think having that pillar that just knows the structure. While Barras, Battle and all that work into it. I thought Battle actually stood out this game. Barras was a bit just occasionally here and there. I don't even think he took an intercept mark technically. So
I think he had a lot of spoils, but I don't think he had an intercept mark at all.
But you know what I mean? Like Essendon were finding ways a bit higher up the ground. Once they would bring the ball forward, they were pretty dangerous. And we did see that a bit last week against Sydney. So that's why I want to say, I don't want to like bring them down and say, oh, actually bottom 4 defense, overrated, whatever. But, this is just still, it's what I expected to be. And that's still very dangerous.
Yeah.
I can see why, this is going to be a fairly hard defense. It's just going to balance and working out the best rotations.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially especially considering they do have an undermanned forward line right now, and so do Essendon currently because of their injuries. So
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like the rotation of like Hardwick and Sicily to be able to play them forward as well as back if need be, that's really good for the Hawks. But it's not entirely stable long term. And like you have Chol as a key forward, but without Deer, it's not entirely reliable. And again, but thankfully they're small forwards. Fantastic. Their midfield, they're able to convert. If they're able to convert, that's fantastic. But it's not a long-term solution until they're able to figure out how to rotate their tools.
Like honestly, the scoring profile of both of these sides were fairly similar. You know what I mean? Like Hawthorn weren't as much bring the ball to ground than probably better movement. But Essendon definitely were locked into at least get the most out of their scoring. And there's going to be a few teams we talk about a bit later that could probably learn from this.
Oh, there is a couple.
Yeah, one that you can probably tell from my tone who might be, but
Yeah,
we'll
we
wait
will.
and see for that.
We'll get to that.
Well, let's go to the individual performances.
Yes, and you highlighted him before, Carl Amon. He was absolutely electric in this game. He finished with 28 disposals, with 26 of them effective, equating to 92.59% efficiency. Excuse me. 10 marks, 7 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 7 score involvements, 2 one percenters, and 643 meters gained. Captain James
Yeah,
Sicily was completely solid in his new floating role, being able to play up and down the field. He collected 24 disposals, 22 of them effective at 91.7% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 3 marks, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements, 9 pressure acts, and 3 ground ball gets. Actually, wait, hang on. I was reading the wrong one. That was my bad. I actually accidentally skipped to Nick Watson. Excuse me for a moment.
oh, okay.
So James Sicily, as I was saying, 24 disposals, 22 effective, 91.7% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 7 marks, with 3 of them intercept marks, 5 score involvements, 5 one percenters, 4 ground ball gets, 3 spoils, and 620 meters gained. And then the wizard Nick Watson, as I was accidentally kind of just went on, he was out playing hockball. He was having a great time. 3 goals from 13 touches, 12 of them effective, and 92.3% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 3 marks, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements, 9 pressure acts, 3 ground ball gets. But yeah, like I think that forward line is, yeah, as we said before, once they figure out their tall issues and their rotations, I think they'll be pretty
Already
dangerous.
play around it from last year. It's just, again, in terms of a full season, and with the loss of Calshadia, like, is that going to make it a bit vulnerable week per week?
Yeah, it'll all be dependent on what kind of defense they come up against, really.
Mm.
And then for the
I.e., not
Essendon,
Essendon.
oh yeah,
Sorry, Essendon.
I mean Essendon has some good spots. Nick Martin, of course, being one of the good ones. I'll talk about him in a sec.
Yeah, the good spot just isn't their defense.
But young gun Jack Caldwell was absolutely dominant in the middle. He kicked 1-1 from 36 disposals, 22 of them effective, equating to 61.1% efficiency, 17 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 11 score involvements, 11 tackles, 27 pressure acts, 12 ground ball gets, and 476 meters gained. Young forward Ben Hobbs did well with forward pressure, finishing with 13 touches, 11 of them effective at 84.6% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements, 7 tackles, with 5 of them inside 50, 11 pressure acts, and 5 ground ball gets. What are you changing? Is it on the wing?
Yeah, you went natural.
Oh yeah, he had a rotating role, didn't he?
Well, no, he was played pure up forward.
Oh, interesting. So Nick Martin apparently was up forward a lot instead of defense, as I would normally prefer him to be. But he collected 24 disposals, 17 of them effective at 70.8% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 10 marks, 7 inside 50s, 8 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, and 425 meters gained.
It was outside forward movement. Like, it's one of those things, is like, do you call it half forward flank? Do you call it the wing? It's neither. It's just try and link the ball up with our forward line, please.
Yeah, pretty
And,
much.
I still think he's maybe doing a bit better off doing that off halfback, but you know what I mean? There are other users there that were okay. Dylan Shield did an okay job, so I guess he just takes that role.
Yeah,
And Nick
I
Martin,
thought Shield had a good game for the most part.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just a good role for him. Like, it's getting his best use out. So, yeah, as I said, he was Nick Martin more involved in, forward chains again.
Mm.
Hence why 7 inside 50s and 8 score involvements.
And
Um,
not that he had the greatest game known to man, but I just want to give a quick shout out to Xavier Desma. Xavier Desma?
yeah,
It is a Desma.
yeah,
Um,
Xavier Desma.
because it was good to see him back on the park. He's one of the players that I actually quite like. Um, so it's good to see him, out and
You
about,
make
because
it sound like there's not
he
many
missed
Essendon players you like.
he missed the early chunk of last season. And came
Yeah,
back late in 2024. Didn't really do all that much, but it's good to see him have
he was
a
pretty
decent
banged
game.
up. Yeah. No, and he sort of started off a bit slowly in this game and then sort of worked into it. He did a few useful things at the end. And yeah, as I said, I would have, shrugged my shoulder. But looking at the player ratings, like I don't necessarily just like rank every player by him, but, he did fairly well. Like he was in, above average in terms of that. So
It's good.
he must have been doing some useful things.
Yeah, for sure. And then on the injury front, Jack Scrimshaw suffered a concussion. Very sad. Kyle Langford did a hamstring. Not very good
Hmm.
for Essendon's forward line when they don't really have a forward line right now.
No, that's going to be concerning.
And then Jordan Ridley also suffered concussion. So the two players out for pretty much 2 weeks. It's a little rough on their front. And then
Yeah.
Langford probably be 3 to 5, which is rough.
Was Scrimshaw actually a concussion? I
That's
think that was
what
just a
that's what the
broken
match
nose.
report said, but I haven't seen any follow up on that.
Okay. Oh, he had like a fountain nose. He got smashed in the
Well,
schnoz.
that probably didn't help.
Which again can give you the concussion. It was just, you know what I mean? It was just, oh, he subbed out. So yeah. Again, he's got a bit of a tentative time. We'll go for the MRO, but he's looking to maybe be out for free unless he successfully challenges his. So, you know, as I said, one defender goes out, and we're looking to see probably Sam Frost play next game, and
I think Frost
maybe
has been kind of in and out as like a sub role at the moment
he
anyway.
starts sub both
Yeah,
games.
so he'll probably be starting
Um,
22 if Scrimshaw doesn't get off.
you would think so. And so maybe we see someone like Chung of GF
Oh
come
yeah,
in,
CJ
and
might be
maybe
ready to
he
come
plays
back in.
more. Oh, he's already been ready. He just hasn't been played.
Oh, well, there you
That's
go.
what I'm saying. It's a bit on the outer with the new Hawks defense. So he did have an interrupted preseason.
That's
But
true.
again, from my accounts, I think he was actually able to be selected. He was an emergency for this game. So yeah, maybe he comes in as more of a versatility role. So we'll see. But
Yeah, absolutely. All right, shall we continue over, put our dear friend Snap out of his misery, and talk about the Geelong
yeah,
Fremantle game?
one of the big floggings. Yeah, I said part 1 or 2 for top 8 hopefuls getting smashed for Saturday night, or Saturday, because this was played fairly early. Freo ended up with a very lackluster performance against Geelong at Goomba. Smashed inefficiency as Geelong restricted Freo's set shots to very, very long and very, very wide. As Geelong were having a free sample of almost any shots they were like. Graham Myers, if you watch the highlights, you need to see his shot because he chose to go from 48 meters on the boundary line, running on the outside to get his goal, which, you know, considering that a lot of people were getting him from the square, that was a bit cheeky.
Do you remember the reaction meme from last season of Jeremy Cameron kicking that goal from the boundary?
Yeah.
Do you think they did the same thing for that goal?
Well, they didn't, but if he was around, he probably would have, because I don't think many people was around. Like, it was just one of those
It was
things
probably on
where
the bench
it was
just
like
going,
the best option. But only Brian Myers would think, you know, that it was still a reasonable options doing that sort of shot. But he nailed it, and it was fantastic to watch. Talking about players that were absolutely fantastic, Jack Henry on the other end of the field absolutely swallowed up Jai Amos. So it was up to the debutant, Murphy Reed, to give Freo a spark of good thing from this game.
which he did.
He, in the third quarter, had some great leads, great crumbing patterns, and actually got them within striking distance. He scored 4 goals in a row, got him to about, I think it was either 21 or 18 points, something like that. But yeah, this was just a flash in the pan. In the fourth quarter, Geelong kicked 10 goals to put this game far away. So going from 13 goals to 23 in a quarter in the hot conditions, it was just tough for the Freos, you know, that maybe got suckered into watching the rest of the game. It was very interesting. Freo, as I've talked about before, they're normally a team that loves ball control. So the fact that Geelong, sorry for saying like the elongated Geelong, but I've gotten used to saying that now. Geelong. And Freo will be going, geez, I wish they let us mark the ball more because they only gave them 55 marks. Well, Geelong got a nice 110 of their own, a nice pure doubling from them. So they were really working hard across the ground and limiting their outside movements. You know, I've said that Fremantle don't particularly pressure too much, either the ball carrier or outside. But this was a case where, yeah, as I said, they really suffered for not getting any of their own game going. Tags on Brayshaw by O'Connor and a quiet first half by Sarong meant that the Dockers were smashed in territories early. I will say you'll talk about this in a bit. Sarong also, on the flip side, had one of the best second halves in football this year.
He did. He was very quiet in that first half, but that second half he was monstrous.
I think it was only 5 disposals in the first half.
Yeah, he was held very well.
He was really quiet, but yeah, it was sort of like Will Day last week, where he went to a monster and then quieted it up a bit. But again, ground ball stats. I thought Geelong just generated so much more useful chains after collects, where Freo would just put under immediate pressure, because I think they were close. But there was a lot of difference between what the Cats were able to generate and what Freo were able to generate. And, the forward pressure was just night and day. And it hurt Freo a lot because they were not marking the ball inside 50 either. I know they were missing Shai Bolton, but even last year, they still were able to get a bit more pressure. So it was one of those things where, it was very much a warning to say, hey, I know, you've got new look. You got, players growing, you got all this hype around you, but if you don't do the honest work in the forward line, Freo's going to be put in a bit of trouble, because I did mention that their depth isn't that great there, and they did lose Switkowski. So it was just one of those cases where I think, whether it's preseason, whether it's, sort of maybe just this matchup, they just weren't getting anything. And as I said, it really took a flash of brilliance by Murphy Reid for this game to even be close to respectable.
Yeah, that's crazy that those 4 to 5 minutes just condensed whatever happened in that first half to minuscule moments that could have made all the difference. And again,
this is a credit to Geelong's defense too, because obviously I said about Jack Henry taking on Jai Amos, but also I'm not sure if I think Tom Stewart was sort of drifting on in between, and also what's his name? Zach Guthrie.
Yes.
Sort of we're getting a lot of intercepts as well, and I'm not sure if he had a direct or a switching opponent, but Josh Tracy, he just sort of got kept very quiet. I think maybe Blitzhouse was on him actually, now I think about it. Would make sense, but as I said, he did drop a few marks, but I thought Tracy was presenting well. It was just they found ways to limit the opportunities for him, and the ball use could have been a bit better. They didn't get that outside to inside movement that I talk about. A lot of the movement was just half back to nothing. While someone like Jordan Clark got a lot of possessions, Wagner, I actually thought he did fairly well, but still there weren't damaging possessions at the same time. Or a player like Matthew Johnson racked up a lot of stats. Hopefully he grows as a player, but he's still not damaging enough for me to think that at the moment he's a very fringe 22 player. And as I mentioned, they had a lot of that last year, where a lot of games like this, where a couple of their harder working players, drop off a bit, it also exposes some of the other players that just need a bit more support. Another one like Liam Reedy to that ruck battle was just so undercooked.
It was so one-sided.
Having him forward. Yeah, well, Luke Jackson did okay, but Reedy didn't look that good when he did take first ruck, which was fairly limited. He didn't take too many ruck options. But Jackson just looked more threatening up forward as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really question, wouldn't it have just been better to play another toll? Because Reedy didn't look that good in the preseason, and he definitely didn't quite look ready now. I know he's still a young player. He might develop, I probably said the same thing. Well, I think I did sort of at Lloyd Meek when he played at Fremantle. He was more of a harder worker. I do think he probably played a bit better than Reedy did, but you know what I mean? he was a hard worker. He just didn't get much reward for effort. And now he's flourishing at Hawthorn. Whereas, yeah, as I said, Reedy couldn't even provide the body when needed. It's something that he'll have to work on, hopefully, with Peel, as they'll get Darcy back in like maybe half a month's time.
Yeah, I think he's still got a couple of weeks on
Yeah,
recovery. So
again,
shall see.
it's a bit of worries. But going back to the Cats again, Midden was absolutely fantastic. Again, their old heads were just as good as the young heads. Obviously, Dangerfield Cameron, still a very important part. Bailey Smith, I think you probably talk about him.
I will talk about him in a moment.
Fantastic into his new club, and it was just a complete effort. Very little performers. Everyone did their job, and as I said, it was an early season blowout. You don't want to get too ahead of yourself, but this is probably just premier Cats when they're firing sort of football.
Yeah, I think the Cats were just on like from the get go, and like they didn't. Granted, they probably didn't need to go at 100% like speed the entire time, because I think they had just the advantage probably the entire game anyway. Granted, they have an extremely healthy list, and that's massive benefits to them.
And this is another game. I think there was 3 or 4 games. I think 3 games with over 80 scored from turnover. Geelong being 14-4. So yeah, Freo were also providing a bit of Geelong's run for them.
Yeah, it's not the greatest look for Fremantle, but again, early season. As we'll say this with most of the games, it is early season. Still got a long way to go. But
there is one thing
go on.
Briefly forgot. And again, I don't want to slam Fremantle too much, but it's one thing I want to see improved, and that's when they don't have their best midfield rotation. And I know they were fairly thin this week. They do give up a lot of not so much direct clearances, but damaging clearances. So a lot of centre bounce goals, a lot of goals from stoppage. They really need to tighten up as a whole unit defensively, because again, they have brilliant individual performers. It's an area where it can leak. And Geelong, again, I made this point, no one really rates Geelong as a top midfield, but when they get an opportunity, they will damage you from the inside.
100%.
They exposed them this match quite clearly.
They very much did. All right. Let's jump on to the individual performances, starting with Bailey Smith, the star off-season recruit, dominant in his debut for the Cats. He kicked 1-1 from 32 touches, 23 of them effective, equating to 71.9% efficiency, 15 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 5 marks, 6 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements, 5 tackles, 26 pressure acts, 12 ground ball gets, and 693 meters gained. He did everything.
Yeah, he was just so... I thought he started a bit rusty, and you know what I mean? Not rusty, but, he had a couple of clangers early, or, not as clean possessions. I thought, this is just going to be a building game for him. But nah, he was just...
he was on.
Bang on.
And, granted, he hadn't played, 14, 15 months, 16 months of football, something like that?
Yeah.
So, to just...
Yeah, because I said...
come out in the first game, just to be completely on fire, it's crazy.
It was he's good, he's getting involved. But, he took that... He took the step within the game, and it wasn't very long. It was after the first 5 minutes, I think.
He just put the foot down and was like, "Nah, Freo ain't having this at all."
Yeah. Talking about that,
Jack Henry, as we mentioned before, was so important in defense. He finished with 24 disposals, 19 of them effective at 79.2% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 11 intercepts, 14 marks, 2 of them contested, 3 of them intercept marks. 2 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets, 2 spoils, and 95% time on ground. And then big man Jeremy Cameron. I also do want to shout out Shannon Neal as well. I thought they were both outstanding up forward. But Jeremy Cameron was accurate on the scoreboard, kicking 4-1 from 15 touches, 9 of them effective, at 60% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 8 marks, 4 of them being contested, 4 of them happening inside 50, and 1 of them being an intercept mark, 3 inside 50s, and 8 score involvements. And then if we jump over to Freo, Andrew Brayshaw, as per normal, was absolutely consistent, which is always good to see. He kicked 1-1 from 26 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 76.9% efficiency. 11 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 28 pressure acts, 7 ground ball gets, and 361 metres gained. Caleb Sarong had that dominant second half, but overall he collected 27 touches, 21 of them effective, equating to 74.2% efficiency. 16 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 11 clearances, 8 score involvements, 15 pressure acts, 9 ground ball gets, and 551 metres gained. And then last but not least, Murphy Reed, the debutant recruited in the 2024 draft, put on a surprise performance, especially in that third quarter, kicking 4 goals in 4 minutes and finishing with 13 disposals, 3 contested possessions, 3 marks, all of them inside 50, and 7 score involvements.
Yeah, so as I said, it was pretty much. Well, I said in terms of Geelong, it was pretty much all round. I will say individually as well. With Jack Henry, how important that was to unleashing Sam De Koning as a pure ruck.
Yeah.
Because I did say that I was actually a bit worried, and it still might be cases later in the season. They might shift their tactics around. But I still thought Sam De Koning as a defender was still sort of required for the way Geelong sort of got, exposed 1-on-1 occasionally. But, an effort like that by Jack Henry, it puts a lot of confidence that, we can run this structure and still put on a defensively dominant performance. So,
yeah, it's
really, I just want to give an extra
really crazy to see
dimension
from the
to his
Cats.
game.
And
Yeah.
and it means if Sam De Koning is now going to be full-time number 1 ruck, seeing as how Reece Stanley is kind of on the outer. Granted, he's pretty close to retirement anyway, so it's not the craziest thing. It does mean that we're going to get the TDK SDK matchup.
Yes.
100% guaranteed. They don't have to try and force it this time.
He might want a bit of revenge too. He did get touched up last time. So
he did. TDK messed him up pretty bad.
You never doubt the pettiness of a younger brother. Maybe after that game it was like, nah, coach, off season, this is on my time. We're going pure ruck. I don't care if you retire me after this game. I just want one against my brother. So
yeah, when that matchup comes around, that's going to be so good to see.
Fingers crossed, touch wood, that they're both healthy and firing.
Speaking of healthiness, unfortunately, we do have to mention there was one injury out of this game. Sam Switkowski had a groin concern and was subbed out. I don't know how bad it was. Hopefully it was just groin tightness or something like that, and it'll be fine for next week. But we'll find out when the injury list comes out on Tuesday.
I think he's likely to get rested just because he had a bit of an interrupted preseason as well. I think they'll give him an extra week to get him right. So. Yeah,
there's a fair chance of it. I assume a couple of these players might get that extra week. Oh well, especially the ones that have the week off, because there are 2 teams that get next week off.
Yeah. So that will be both the Sydney teams. I think Freo might have the week off after that though. So
I'm pretty sure it's Gold Coast that has this week.
No, sorry.
I'm pretty sure it's Gold Coast that has round 2 off.
Yeah, sorry. 2 expansion teams. Sometimes I put Gold Coast into the Sydney, but yeah.
I mean, sometimes it feels like they live in Sydney, considering they're so close to the border.
Yeah, that too. So anyway,
speaking of Sydney, do you want to jump over?
Yes. Yeah, well, this one, I'd say, and I will apologize because again, I was out, so I didn't get to watch this game and probably give it as comprehensive a coverage as it probably deserves. But it was an absolutely fascinating contest. It was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, and it wasn't without struggles. But the Lions surged after a 5-1 start to the favour of Sydney. To nab a solid win against the now 0-2 Swans. They lost this contest 82-12-10 to Brisbane's 86-12-14. So really not much in between them. And yeah, it was sort of unlikely heroes early on, I will say, because early, forget about the Chad. We're going Corey, the teenage heartbreaker Warner. And he kicked a couple of goals, I think maybe both from 50-metre penalties. I know one was, but so he napped a couple. Brain Campbell for Sydney also got involved. Whilst on the other end, a bit after once Brisbane started to fight back, Zach Bailey, not shy of goals, but not normally one to get 4. He ended up with getting that for the entire game and sort of got the lines going. In individual performances, James Jordan also absolutely crushed Nocky Neal in a tag, restricting him to only 10 possessions with only half of them effective.
Yeah, it's crazy.
On the flip side, I will say Josh Dunkley did go off the chain, so it was sort of pick your poison sort of thing for
We'll talk about
Brisbane.
that in a moment.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of structure, that's why I'd say hard to tag Brisbane, because they really have other players that can fire. But like shades of last year, Isaac Heaney did his utmost to try and get the Swans back in it late. He had a clutch last goal to get them within 4, but they just couldn't get the last look they wanted. They opted for a long kick. It only resulted in the rush behind, and Brisbane were able to win this game after a pretty respectable performance, I'll say, overall. Because, both offenses got a bit going. Some of it was error assisted from both set shot and general play.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the biggest errors was unfortunately youngster, who I really rate, Matt Roberts, turning it over from the kick in. But yeah, as I said, it's just sort of Brisbane missed some of their direct shots from directly in front. And then Sydney had 9 shots that didn't even trouble the scorers. So both teams also sort of left a bit on the table. But overall, they were generating. Brisbane's midfield, again, they got their natural forward half game going after that first quarter. And they comfortably beat Sydney in the stoppages and stats and scores. So, it was one of those games where I think, again, both teams didn't quite get what they want. But I'll say there was a lot more positives than negatives. Again, maybe Sydney's defense is still, I'd say, I wouldn't say it's a worry, but you know what I mean? Like, it's the thing that's the biggest unknown in the Dean Cox era.
Yeah.
As they sort of, struggled with some matchups. Didn't let too many big people goals in. But again, the Lions were still able to work in to the inside. So, yeah, as I said, maybe it's more of like what do you call it? A defensive philosophy. Again, they've played more one-on-one than they have restrictive than before.
Mm-hmm.
But they've still also tinkered a bit. And players like Nick Blakey, I know you'll probably run through the stats with him, but just in terms of his fit in the team, look to be firing again. Like, again, I did make that comment last year about how he would sometimes be a bit more of an offensive backman than a defensive backman when sometimes they needed him to be.
Mm-hmm.
But he looks really locked in this year. Like, ooh. Again, I don't want to go early on all Australian, but if he keeps on putting these sort of performance, and it's so useful for Sydney's defense, yeah, as I said, he'll be another look in for that. And, as I said, Joel Hamlin comes into the side. I think he was new for this week. Played pretty well considering he's coming off a fairly injured few years, and the Pelican did okay. So really, again, it's just getting that mix in defense for them. Their defensive transition, maybe not allowing so much outside run like they did last year. But unfortunately, when you lose one of your best outside players as well, you can't be too harsh on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially considering this was the grand final rematch. The fact that it was still so close, despite all the injuries, despite all the missing players, is still a credit to both teams.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more enjoyable than last year. But, it's one of those things where Sydney just, again, it's gone, for me, it's gone from a bit of concern last week to probably just tinkering. I think they're on the right track, and I'm probably more confident. But we'll see how they go again, we'll know after 5 weeks, whether we start to see some actual gel.
Yeah, it's normally when we start to approach the middle of the season is whether we know where teams are sitting and what they need to adjust and change.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Jumping over to individual performances, Josh Dunkley, as you mentioned before, he was absolutely immense in the midfield. He kicked a goal from 27 disposals, 19 of them effective at 70.4% efficiency. 16 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 5 marks, with 2 of them being intercept marks, 6 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 6 score involvements. He had that 6-6-6 lineup. 10 tackles, with 2 of them being inside 50, 18 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 9 grab ball gets, and 614 meters gained. The big O, Oscar McInerney, in his first game since missing the grand final, looked to be in solid form, getting 16 hitouts, only 7 to advantage. The reason why they're so low is because he was up against Brodie Grundy, who kind of did dominate him, and Darcy Fort. But I think around the ground, the Big O did a lot more. He kicked 1-1 and collected 18 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 5 marks, 2 of them being inside 50, 2 contested, 5 inside 50s overall, 7 clearances, 7 score involvements, and 5 ground ball gets.
And it should be noted, Sydney did win 6 more clearances than Brisbane, so...
They did. And then Zach Bailey, as you also mentioned, was accurate up forward, kicking 4-1 from 17 touches, 15 of them effective at 88.2% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 7 score involvements, 11 pressure acts, and 8 ground ball gets, with 4 of them being inside 50.
Yeah, honestly, he's bubbling to a very under the radar sort of player. You know what I mean? Like, his last maybe 3 years have been pretty solid without getting too much recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his performances have been just better and better. Like each time he's gone about it, and it's very rare at this point where he actually gets tagged and shut down.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's sort of hard when you're like that outside, half forward, because you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost a positionless, like I said before, with maybe like Nick Martin, because, if you do put a proper defender, you might be bringing them out too high. But if you put a pure winger, they can sort of get lost or get dragged a bit back too much. So, I can see why teams do it. It's very damaging to have like a very offensive-minded, defensive-minded wing structure. But yeah, as I said, Zach Bailey, I think it's just, you could only, like, honestly, it's like a perfect sort of style of winger for Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just being so forward-oriented.
Absolutely. And then just for the highlighted players for Sydney, James Rowbottom played a solid tagging role. He finished with 11 touches, 11 contested possessions, 3 intercepts, 3 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 11 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and 4 ground ball gets. He was putting a lot of tough pressure onto that Brisbane outfit, and it was really, really good. Obviously, didn't get the 4 points, but I think his performance overall was very solid. Nick the Lizard Blakey, as we mentioned before, was once again so important in defense, collecting 24 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, quick maths, 7 intercepts, 4 marks, 1 of them being contested, 3 of them being intercept marks, 4 inside 50s, 3 1%ers, and 652 meters gained. And then Joel Hamling, as you mentioned before, did a lot of work as a defender, finishing with 11 disposals, 9 of them effective, equating to 81.8% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 4 marks, 2 of them being contested, 3 of them being intercept marks, 9 1%ers, and 7 spoils.
Yeah. So I think it's just one of those things where both defenses sort of shut down a lot of tall people play, because I just realized, because, looking at it, Sydney's forward line again didn't really function all that much. Like, Tom Carlton got a goal. Joel Amati apparently played a pretty bad game for his standards. Even Tom Papley didn't really get involved. So, as I said, both teams were having to, again, find that outside source of goals, which, again, probably favoured Brisbane a bit more just because of how damaging some of their midfield players can be in attack. But, as I said, Heaney, Brain Campbell, as I mentioned before, got a couple, and Chad Warner. So, it's just one of those things where it's sort of, I think just that better forward structure might have also helped Brisbane. Because again, I didn't quite see it, but just looking at the stats, as I said, it just seemed like, they got just that enough out of their tall forwards. Hipwood still kicked a goal. Logan Morris kicked one. Darcy Fort as well. Shout outs to him. Like, he's just like, you know what? Maybe I'm not done after the grand final. Maybe I still got some more left in the tank. And yeah, just played as a forward this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe he's the answer to not having Danaher anymore.
Who knows? I mean, we're joking, but if you look at the stats, he was the most involved forward player for Brisbane. What is it? 14 disposals, 4 marks. I mean, as the next best is let's see, Logan Morris with 5, Eric Hipwood with 5. You know what I mean? It was involved.
Who knows? I mean, yeah, considering Hipwood plays a little bit further up the ground now rather than like deep forward, it's not a bad shout to have Darcy Fort like in the forward line more consistently.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we'll see what happens. He did also play in the midfield, to be fair, so I'm not exactly sure the distribution of those numbers exactly, but yeah, as I said, it's just good to see him.
Yeah.
After what was a fairy tale for him, heartbreak for Omac. You know what? Maybe they're like, let's win a premiership together. Why not?
Let's duo it up rather than being solo rocks instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Sadly, there were some injuries on the injury front. Kyle Lohman did an ankle. Thankfully, thanks to my friend Bree in the chat, as I am live streaming us recording this episode, he was cleared of any major damage, so he'll still be out for a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
But won't be long term, thankfully. And then, yeah, Brandon Starcevich out with concussion after a bad knock. I do mention that in the MRO reports, which I'll do at the end of our breakdowns. But yeah, he's going to be out for at least 2, probably.
And this is a bigger story because he did get concussed in the preseason as well. So coming off 2 close very together, he might be looking for a few more weeks as well. Because I know when you're getting close together, they had another couple of weeks. So
yes. Yeah, he might be out for at least 3 to at least 4 weeks,
4.
maybe.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see. Again, it depends on testing, I think. So fingers crossed, hope the best. But yeah, I don't actually think we'll be seeing him for the short term.
All right, shall we jump over to our next match?
Yes. Are we starting off with a bit of a Melbourne clash at Etihad's? Oh, yeah, Etihad Marvel Stadium.
It's the same place.
I know. But yeah, North Melbourne, they didn't take a lead this entire match, but they really kept their injury-battling Bulldogs honest as they sort of prevented a blowout when their forward line got firing a little bit into the first quarter, because I had a look at the timeline of this game. Again, I didn't watch it, but it seemed that they did get the ball inside enough. They just weren't very efficient until, they got a bit of their game going. Despite a low amount of intercepts, both teams actually scored fairly healthy from them, and it sort of probably gave, I'm guessing, the Rees a few more avenues to score. And honestly, if they could find a few more ground level shots, they would have probably had a very solid forward half production for this entire game. In fact, 14-3, that's already a fairly healthy score. It's just going against the Doggies with a fairly struggling defense. You're going to have to really, generate a good score and then some.
Yeah.
Because as we know, the Bulldogs love to ramp it up against iffy defensive structures. For the most part, they did. Again, they did cough up a bit of their lead from early on. Again, unfortunately, the match just decided that defense was going to be a bit of an afterthought. Maybe not so much of an afterthought for the Doggies because they were just running out of men. O'Donnell, unfortunately, he got a injury in this game, as well as Mitch Cleary. He was involved in the what's his name? Jackson Archer bump, which is again going to the MRP. I think we'll hear news about that next week, but that's a fairly contentious one. We'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, as I said, and for North Melbourne as well, they lost, unfortunately, Griffin Logue again for a hamstring injury.
Wow.
So this was just a game where even if these teams wanted to be a bit more defensively structured, it just wasn't happening. So at the very least, I think for both teams, they can at least take a very solid forward half game. I think also, while the Bulldogs were missing some of their forward half generators, with Treloar, Bontempelli, all that, One of the biggest things for them, which is very impressive, is I'm not sure if you talked about either of them. I didn't actually look at who you put this game, but
No, I don't.
Richards and Kennedy both got 4 goal assists each, which the Bulldogs will very much enjoy because Richards, we've already said, is one of the best kicks inside 50. I think there was a stat last year that confirmed that some of his link ups were the best in the league. And Matt Kennedy, that's sort of what they brought him in for. You know, the Dogs had a lot of entries last year, not that efficient. This is the sort of player that they were the sort of style they were looking for with Kennedy. So, you know, that sort of helped his offense fire as per normal. I don't have much to say about this game. Again, I could only really briefly look. I did look a bit of the highlights, but yeah, as I said, to me, it just seemed like a very offense-dominated game. A lot of sore-off turnovers, a lot of damaging fast play. But in terms of like, you know, any interesting structures or all that, it's much more what you would sort of expect for a Western Bulldogs and North game, or at least, you know, what I can pick up from it. Maybe the best thing was Western Bulldogs getting a bit more defensive half score. Again, tinkering up a bit. Joel Freer, again, a man that I've been pumping up a lot this season. You know, he even found himself in the centre. 36 centre bounce attendance, so
Very
sort
nice.
of drifting from the back to the midfield. So interesting to see how he will be involved. Maybe again, this is just to play while they've got some players missing, but yeah, I love him as a distributor.
It's very good to see that he's like getting to learn more about different roles in the team, and who knows, maybe in the future, like especially with as much as Liver is playing a fantastic game at the moment, he is getting very close to retirement age. So what if like Freya could take his role in a long term sort of situation?
Again, it's like
It's
he hasn't even played a full year of football. Yeah, I know it's his second year, but he was picked up in the mid-season draft. So you know what I mean? Like it does transition fairly well. So I don't blame the Dogs for taking a look at it.
yeah, and like again, as much as you got to look at the short term, you know, you're trying to be top 8 contenders. Like you've got to still look at the long term at the same time and look at your developing players, and especially and look at the players that are bound to retire in the next year or two, and see like where you can shuffle.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, again, just in terms of generalities too, like I think it was important for the Dogs to play out this game. Like I don't want to say not have a Carlton, but I really do mean not have a Carlton. You know what I mean? Because again, the Dogs, they've got a lot of injuries, and the first bit of their season is pretty harsh. So to not drop a game like this, to keep themselves contending, when, you know, until the fixture opens up in the back half of the year, again, a lot of games that Eddie had, a lot of games against potential bottom 8 teams. You know, so they want to keep themselves in good stead. So
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
very big tick for them. And North Melbourne, you know, you can sort of see what they're doing. They did tinker around a bit. I can't really say anything because I didn't watch it, but you know, they played Colby McKercher a bit on the wing. I think there was another. Oh yeah, they played Parker as a pure midfielder, which I found interesting. I thought he would play a bit more up forward, but yeah, I'll have to watch a North game to see how that really looks, in my opinion. But otherwise, you know, they generated a bit of score, and their defense still needs a bit of tinkering, but we all sort of need that.
I mean, to North's credit, not that I talk about them much in my individual breakdowns, but the veteran talent that they brought in from the other teams, I like right off the bat have managed to do a lot of work in like rejuvenating and relifting all of these younger players and giving them much more of a spark than what they would have without that veteran leadership. I guess especially from Luke
And
Parker.
yeah, as I say, Caleb Daniel, again, he was still fairly involved in their back half movement. Again, I'm not sure how it related in structure or anything, but, you know, I was like, I just thought he might have been a bit fringe. Again, I would still prefer seeing Colby McKercher in the back half, but, you know, it does give you that flexibility there. So
Mm.
we'll see in the long term where the chips sort of fall.
But
But yeah, as I said, overall, it's still a tick.
like the fact that the Dogs only won by 16, like 113 and 97, like that's still an impressive. Like I think in terms of what Clarko was looking for, I think he would count that as a win. Like yeah, it's not 4 points, but it's a decent performance. It's better than getting absolutely stomped.
I think it depends a lot on next week.
Yeah, I mean,
Because,
it's
again,
early season, so it's not too much to really
yeah, I just think North
gauge.
have to be a bit part, they have to be a bit past, 1 week honourable loss performance. Because if they don't back it up against Melbourne, he did look fairly good in their matchup. This is just going to be a case of, as I said,
Oh,
the doggies.
we might go a
North
little
Melbourne
bit
not
more in
finding too
depth
much
with
consistency.
the Melbourne GWS game because there's a couple of players in that game that I want to highlight very specifically that I don't think I even have in my list. So
Yeah.
that
Anyway, let's go through the
when we get to
doggies
that
and
matchup, that'll be very interesting. But yes, let's
yeah.
talk about the Doggies and North Melbourne players. My individual performance highlights. Tom Liberatore, of course. He looks to be continuing his preseason form, finishing with 28 disposals, 21 of them effective, finishing at 75% accuracy, 15 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 9 clearances. He did kick up behind, sadly. Not a goal. He wishes. But 7 score involvements, 8 tackles, 22 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, and 354 metres gained. Big man Aaron Norton was very key up forward. He kicked 3-1 from 17 touches, 11 of them effective at 64.7% efficiency. 9 contested possessions, 8 marks, 4 of them contested, 4 of them inside 50. 9 score involvements, and 10 pressure acts. And then Rory Lobb, who's looking more and more at home in defence. Was influential once more, finishing with 11 disposals, 8 of them effective, equating to 72.7% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 3 score involvements, 11 pressure acts, 10 1%ers, 5 ground ball gets, 8 spoils, and 100% time on ground.
Love a good Hundy, don't you, Blazy?
Absolutely. There's a couple that I mentioned this week, I'm pretty sure. Speaking of a player that I love though, Tristan Sherry, my personal All-Australian ruckman. I don't care about Max Swan. He looks to be fit and firing in the ruck, finishing with 51 hitouts. That's not even the highest tally that I caught this week, by the way. I'll talk about that later. With 13 of them to advantage. And 17 touches, 11 of them effective, equating to 64.7% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 4 marks, 2 of them being contested, 3 of them being intercepts. So obviously one of them was both. 5 clearances, 5 score involvements, 7 tackles, 16 pressure acts, and 6 ground ball gets. Big Suv, Nick Clarkey, was back to contending for the Coleman. He does not get ahead of the Coleman this week, though. I will talk about that a bit later, too. Kicking 5-1 from 8 disposals, 6 of them being effective, equating to 75% accuracy, efficiency, quick maths. 5 contested possessions, 3 marks. All of them were inside 50, 2 of them were contested marks, and 9 score involvements. And then former Bulldog Caleb Daniel, as we mentioned before, he was prolific with ball movement, finishing with 24 disposals, 19 of them effective, equated to 79.2% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 6 tackles, 17 pressure acts, and 410 meters gained. And a brief shout out at the end to Paul Curtis. He showed a lot more promise so far up forward, kicking 3 goals, and Sam Davidson, who was a former VFL Tiger, kicking a goal on debut.
Yeah, so as said, and I should say like there was a lot of young kids that showed a lot of promise. O'Sullivan did pretty good. For his obviously there's other midfielders that probably had a bit more involved.
O'Sullivan's
Costanti too.
debut, for note, and Costanti's debut actually. Speaking of,
Yeah. Costanti too. Never actually played a game for Sydney, so he actually enjoyed it. Playing up in the forward line.
I think he was like
Yeah,
forward to
small
mid,
forward.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had Josh Dolan, Sam Davison, as you mentioned before, both playing their debuts. A bit more limited from them, but as we mentioned, Sam Davison kicked a nice goal. So Bulldogs having to find a few youngsters with their injuries and, still looking solid in that regards.
Well,
Um,
the future is young, as they say.
yeah. So again, hopefully they can bring it up against some other more we'll say restrictive opponents. They get a matchup against Collingwood next week, but at least for now, it's at least enough to keep them instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to touch on injuries, there are a couple, as we've already mentioned. James O'Donnell broke his jaw, I believe, or had some kind of jaw concern. So he's out. Luke Cleary got hit in the head by Jackson Archer, so he's immediate concussion right off the bat. So he's out for a couple weeks too. And then Jackson Archer was also getting suspended for 3 matches, which I will touch on that. He is challenging it.
Mm.
Also, like, did a bit of damage to his leg in that contest at the same time. So he's going to be out, I
Yeah.
think, regardless. Which is
Yeah, I saw it only,
unfortunate.
not enough to comment officially, but it did look very, it looked more of a damaging contest than anything malicious. You know what I mean? I think there was a bit of bad luck
Yeah.
that sort of resulted in that. But yeah, as I said, we'll go through it.
All right. Let's
Probably
probably.
talking about going through it.
Oh yeah.
Talking about going
There
through
is a
it.
team that went through it.
Yeah, and look, for a few of these thrashings, we're going to keep it a bit condensed. Unfortunately or fortunately, if you like seeing me suffer, yeah, we'll probably go through this one a bit quickly. But Port penciled in their annual thrashing to Collingwood's. Their last 3 games, I think, have been 70+ losses to Collingwood.
Look, had I known that was the
Um,
case, I wouldn't have tipped them.
I want to mention that last week, but maybe it wasn't quite in my head.
You might have, but I had some
Yeah,
faith after Collingwood's performance last week.
yeah. Well, as I said, they may have been old and slow, but it's better than inefficient and young. But yeah, as I said, they early on Port kept up in a few major areas, but couldn't really convert. That conversion issues all night. They looked dreadful. It was pretty much equivalent to the Sydney match last year in the prelim, and they were also their own worst enemy again, letting 99 points come from turnover, double what they actually just scored themselves. So 45 double being, of course, 90 for those math impaired people in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Collingwood moved their ball from halfback really well, found plenty of avenues to expose the Port's defence, who, from what I gather, looked in very disarray, while the likes of Maynard, Josh Dacos, Darcy Moore, and painfully Dan Houston got some very easy interceptions and were involved in a healthy amount of score involvements to boot. It was night and day, the defensive structures between both teams. And, last week I did mention sometimes Port's midfield, the Magpies midfield craps the bed and exposes both lines, where it seems that this week they were able to patch that up fairly easily. I did say last week that, it only takes a bit of tinkering for Collingwood to turn it around.
Yeah,
And,
it does, and we did
yeah,
see that a lot last season. Even though they didn't really get the results that they wanted, they were able to shift players around fairly quickly and get improved results.
yeah. They were inconsistent, but you know what I mean? Like, they were at least getting patches of really good play. And, as I said, this is just a very extreme example of this. In terms of a bit more structure and a bit more pain for Port. While I did say that, like, stoppages were a very decent area of score for Port in 2024, or comparatively, they only got 1 goal 3 from stoppages this match, which, it means almost all of their very meager score came from Collingwood. You know what I mean? And it gets a bit insulting when that happens, because it's like, yeah, you got 45 points, but we sort of let you score those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a very dire scoreline. And, Darcy Moore, shouts out to him. He absolutely shut down Georgiadis. He only took 2. The whole Port team only took 2 contested marks for the entire night. So they struggled in that area too. Port, as I mentioned, just had too many passengers, while Collingwood just went from outside movement to directly in front of goals far too often.
That's absolutely right. And it was pointed out to me earlier, but Nick Dacos apparently got his first and only contested mark in this game, which is a very interesting stat. If that is
I have
100%
heard
true.
that. No, I do remember, like, he hadn't taken a contested mark. I will say, it gives me great pleasure that Port gave it to him. Maybe it's a good or bad thing, because he was getting tagged, so maybe it means that Willem Drew, gave him a bit of challenge there. But yeah, as I said, yeah, it was just one of those games. Like, Port's midfielders were their best stats getters, but it really doesn't mean anything because they didn't convert. I'm not going to insult other teams who generate big midfield stats but can't convert it, and then, like, say that this was an acceptable performance by Port's midfield. Again, I didn't watch it, but just from, what I know about the team, what's sort of been discussed online, I've tried to look at some of the more constructive criticisms than I have pictures of signs at Alberton Oval.
Yes. The ones that
Suggesting,
show up every time Port lose.
yeah, well, I mean, I can see why they put it up. And, there's things to talk about, but, I don't really want to go into them or add to that discussion too much.
No, I
as
don't want
I've
to touch
always
on that
said.
either.
Jen Hinkley, is getting a lot of talk about him, but really, in terms of play style, in terms of structure, you know what I mean? It's just, we have seen it before. We have seen Port come back, so you've got to give him a bit. But, this year's going to happen the way it happens. It's just a game like this makes you think that it's another season where even if we do make a good run at it, it's probably not a deep finals year unless there's like a huge marked forward improvement, which we just haven't seen under. And I will say it's not all Ken Hinkley's fault because Chad Corns has been our forward coach for years, and our forward line has been abysmal for years. So
I'm just hoping that it's abysmal this week.
Yeah, maybe. Well, who knows? So, so we'll go through the individual performances and move on for this.
We will, and you're gonna. You really don't like the first person I'm talking about, but I got to do it. It's Dan Houston.
Yeah.
He was that good. He was prolific off halfback. He finished with 27 disposals, 24 of them effective, equating to 88.9% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 5 inside 50, 6 score involvements, 5 tackles, 12 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 7 ground ball gets, and 3 spoils. He just did what Dan Houston does.
Yeah, as I said, I honestly looked at his stat lines and I'm like, yeah, that's a very Dan Houston game. You know what I mean?
When you let him play how he wants to play.
Looking for. Sorry?
When you let him play how he wants to play, like.
Oh yeah, you can't leave him unchecked because he does get involved up the ground as well. So
he does.
As Collingwood wanted that offensive generation from the back half, and in this match they scored 10-3. They didn't quite get it last week, and they didn't have Houston. So maybe he is the link. Who knows there? Like,
well, the stats.
You never know
how
to put it on one person, but it does help.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the stats currently do not lie about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Former Saint Tim Membry kicked cleanly in front of goal. He kicked 4-1 from 17 touches, 12 of them effective, 70.6% efficiency. 6 contested possessions, 10 marks, with 4 of them being inside 50. He got 4 inside 50s as well, 2 goal assists, 11 score involvements, and 4 ground ball gets. And then Lockie Schultz. Funny how the 3 players that I'm talking about are all from former clubs.
Yeah.
And then former Freo player Lockie Schultz was a pressure ball. He kicked 1 goal from 17 disposals, 14 of them effective, equating to 82.4% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, with 4 of them being inside 50, 24 pressure acts, and 7 ground ball gets.
Continuing the trend. Another former player.
Another former player, except for you this time. Jordan Sweet was very solid in the ruck, despite, everything else happening. He got 36 hitouts and 9 of them to advantage, and 14 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, a goal, and 11 pressure acts. I thought veteran Ollie Wines did his absolute best with what he was given in that midfield. He collected 34 touches, 18 of them contested, 5 intercepts, 3 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles, 22 pressure acts, and 11 ground ball gets. And then it's up to you if you want to talk about this last one. I'm fine to leave it.
I mean, I don't honestly, from what I gather, the next best player was actually Connor Rosie, with 31, 35 disposals, 680 meters gained, 5 clearances. But yeah, as I said, I could see why you want to shy away from that Port midfield because again,
there wasn't really too much I wanted to highlight because I looked at the other stats and they're not really all that impressive. And then I wanted to try and highlight someone from your defense. That was the best I could find, and there isn't really much else.
Yeah, it's because he put down Jeremy Finlayson. But yeah, as I said, he did cough up 4 goals to Tim Membry and apparently a few more. So, I don't know. I think Port just didn't have that many good players, honestly. Yeah, that's about. You can kind of tell, like, that style of game when you're struggling to get anything more than two. So,
Yeah,
Rosie
absolutely.
did do all right, but yeah, as I said, it's just
It's
you sort of expect that.
Yeah, you expect him and
All
Butters
right,
to like absolutely lift when they can, but it's not
mm,
always that it's going to be in a
Mr.
positive sense,
Butters,
apparently.
I'll be glad.
Speaking
Yeah, well, Rosie sometimes was like that last year, but yeah.
speaking of a game
Anyway,
that lifted in a positive sense, but not for St Kilda, the Adelaide
no.
Crows absolutely dominant today.
I did get the scoreline. The scoreline was 136 to 21-10, 136 to 69-45. I said I was going to get better at reading the scores this year. I don't think I will. I never learn. Um, yeah, Adelaide 21-9, 135. St Kilda 10-12, 72. Honestly, it was a horror show defensive for St Kilda, especially early on. I think they patched it up a tiny bit later, but they left some very easy third staff goals in. We're talking about handballs to unmanned people directly
Mm-hmm.
in front of goals. As they just struggled all day with that 3-12 combination of Adelaide's forward line, being Phil Thorpe, Fogarty, and, well, for the first half, Tex Walker.
Yes.
Adelaide's pressure was absolutely fantastic all day. Their midfield to forward line connection, so much better. Shout outs to Dawson. I gave him a bit last year, but this is the sort of Dawson I wanted to see. He was taking strong marks, being a link up player, getting absolutely involved. And it
Yeah,
wasn't just him, it was bringing players with him.
he had a captain's
Saligo
game,
ranked.
like straight
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Yeah, so as I said, he brought the midfield with him. Saligo, Rankin, Rochelle, Crouch all got involved in the scoring as well. So, a lot of avenues for there. I did mention St Kilda did get into the contest. It was more for getting their offense going as earlier on. It was purely the debutant, Max Hall, for St Kilda that scored, I think it was like the first 2 goals won or something
I
of
think
their
that's
score.
correct. Yeah.
Before eventually some other players got into the game, mainly Jack Higgins. But really, again, Adelaide's defence kept most attack at bay, and that being, the main Worrell Keane Murray combination.
Mm-hmm.
But, to the Saints' credit, they did actually work hard to generate their scoring. And, it may have just been the heat in the Adelaide Oval that sort of got them in,
It
but
was
they
a, it was a
did.
pretty warm day over there.
Yeah, I think it was one of three, I think, 30-degree days
Yes.
plus. I know Geelong was, the Eagles game was, and I think this one.
I think it was this one, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Um, yeah. So they only got 9 shots off in the first half before getting more opportunities later. That's sort of what I wanted to highlight, a bit of the discrepancy. So, for the Saints, again, it was a lot in the forward half, but I
Mhm.
think they will be a bit concerned about how bad their defense was looking earlier on. It was almost a bit of a mercy move, Tex Walker coming off, because, obviously they're going to manage Tex.
Yes.
Like, this was just a
Correct.
perfect opportunity to, I don't want to talk about Kane Corns too much, but he was like, oh, Kane, he was on the outer, all that. But, when you look at the damage that structure gave St Kilda, like, Tex Walker, it's worth bringing him for those half games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if it's a forward line you can stretch out. Again, with Josh Battle out, I mentioned before, what's his name? The Zane Cordy.
St. Cordy, yes.
Not quite a second defender level yet. Well,
He did also push up
you
forward
wouldn't want him defending
for a
a
bit in this
really
game.
athletic tall. Yeah,
Yes,
he
agreed.
wasn't that great. So yeah, so and as we mentioned, watching a Ross Lyon team not have a defense is like watching a Michael Bay movie without explosions. You know what I mean? It's like
It doesn't feel like a
you're
Ross Lyon
missing
kind
that
of
one
team.
tone. You're waiting for it, and then you're like, man, there's really not much left to work with
And
afterwards.
like,
So
yeah, you've got Cordy, who is here and all there currently at the moment. You've got Cal Wilkie, who always tries his best. You've got Jack Sinclair, you've got Marcus Winteger, but it's not exactly what you want out of the St Kilda defense right now.
Yeah, and as I said, it was a bit. I don't know. I even think because I thought Ari Schoenmaker, he did give away a few free kicks. He did give away some goals, but again, I think with a bit of better structure, he might fall into that defense a bit better. But yeah, as I said, there was just a lot of
Yeah.
needed defense, and it came a bit with their ball movement because they had an absolute. We said last year that they were they were the best scoring team from halfback.
They were, yeah, which is
And
crazy considering they had a really poor season.
And yeah, so this time that they only got 4-3, which again, not that far off their forward half shot generation, but again, once that dries up, because Brad Hill, he had an absolute shocking game. Wangani Malira got involved, but he wasn't that clean. In the back half, I thought he made up for it a bit, but you know what I mean? It was just that connection that was really missing.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was a bit weird that they didn't actually debut Boxall for that game, because I thought he was really solid in the preseason. And I think in terms of midfield looks, I think he was a player that sort of, could have been in, because they brought in Hunter Clark, but he didn't really get involved as the sub in the game.
Maybe they're saving him for a home game debut. That's just off the top of my head.
I wouldn't say that.
I feel like that shouldn't.
Point.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the call. Like, if he's ready, play him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they just maybe thought that. Again, I also thought McRae would play a bit of an outside role, and we'll talk about McRae because he had a fantastic game.
Yes, I will.
But I thought McRae would play a bit more of that link-up role. But no, he's playing pure guts. So again, that's what I thought. Also, maybe a Boxall could maybe come in. Again, maybe even put Hunter Clark in the middle and give Boxall that sort of inside-out sort of look. But as I said, they just structure-wise they were pretty awful, and especially comparing it to the Crows outside, because again, it wasn't just their inside players who had a great game, because and it came from a lot of the newer players. Neil Bullen played pretty well,
yes.
And Isaac Cumming. He wasn't too involved in the first half, but got a nice couple of goals late for reward. And Lockie Scholl, again, just a player that keeps on improving. Had games last year where he looked really good. And in the back half, I thought, when Adelaide improved, he was, becoming a game-by-game player, and he's brought it into next year. So I love to see that.
And I haven't mentioned him in my notes, but a brief shout out to James Peatling as well, someone we highlighted massively last season. Had a really solid game for his debut with the Crows.
Yeah. Still finding, he was a bit rough with his disposal at times, but in terms of presentation and the fact that he just had other players providing as well, it was just good to see him
absolutely
fairly well into the game.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump over to my individual performances. Isaac Rankin, he looked back to pretty much being his best. Kicked 2-1 from 28 disposals, 19 effective, equating to 67.9% efficiency, 16 contested possessions, 6 inside 50, 7 clearances, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 10 ground ball gets, and 332 meters gained. Riley O'Brien was dominant in the ruck, now that they're finally playing him back as the number 1 ruckman, collecting 47 hitouts, 14 to advantage, and 12 touches, 4 contested, 5 clearances, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles, 12 pressure acts, and 4 1%ers. And then Darcy Fogarty, he was very accurate in the forward line. He kicked 4 goals from 12 disposals, 6 marks, with 3 of them being inside 50, 4 inside 50s overall, 8 score involvements, and 8 pressure acts. And then...
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, they were just firing on all cylinders in that forward line. It really did feel like 2023 Crows when they led the lead in scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. And then jumping over to St Kilda, we are going to highlight Jack McRae. He was absolutely unbelievable for his 250th game, but also his first of the Saints.
Down though.
That's such a weird stat.
I know. It's just, and I know you're going to have a weird one with obviously Jack Darling. As long as he stays fit, it's going to have his Yeah,
I think he was on
against the
247
Eagles.
when he moved over.
Yeah.
So he's like super close to
It's
his
looking to line
250th
up
as
when they
well.
play the Eagles, so that'll be interesting.
That would be funny actually if that lines up. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Jack McRae was unbelievable in his 250th. He collected 34 disposals, 23 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 12 clearances, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 17 pressure strikes, 4 1%ers, 15 ground ball gets with 4 of them inside 50, and 360 meters gained. And then last but not least for me, Captain Jack Steele. I thought he had a really solid pressure game. He finished with 19 touches, 15 of them effective, equating to 78.9% efficiency. 10 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 4 score involvements, 6 tackles, 23 pressure acts. Okay, why do I have that there
Yeah.
twice? Anyway, 23 pressure acts and something else apparently, but that's okay. Overall, I think he had a really solid pressure game.
Well, if I was gonna guess, it wouldn't be score involvements.
Might
Oh
be
no, full score
10 ground
involvement.
ball gets maybe.
Ground ball gets. That
That's
seems
normally
right.
my last stat. But anyway,
Yeah, Jack
overall
Steele 10 ground ball gets.
oh
That
yeah,
is
there we go.
a
Anyway, he
true
had a solid game.
fact.
Solid game.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things where it's a bit hard because like I thought he played a reasonable game too. I think structurally though, when you because obviously I think Jack Steele was playing his more defensive role that he normally takes. He was letting Jack McRae get the I don't want to say easier ball, but you know what I mean. Like be more of that link up player.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Jack McRae was looking to break the clearance record. He did slow down. He got 9 in the first half. 10 by Tom Rockcliffe when he played for Brisbane was the half-time record. But he ended up finishing with just 12,
Yeah, which
as you
means
mentioned.
either St Kilda shut down or he started getting tagged.
I didn't think it was tagged. I think that was just Adelaide in the clearances. They were pretty mediocre
True.
all day, really. You know, as I said, they won clearances themselves, but you know what I mean? As that like what is it? Nearly 1/4 of them. In fact, exactly 1/4 of Oh, sorry, no, I'm looking at the wrong clearances. A bit more than a fourth of the clearances were from Jack McRae.
Oh yeah,
42 clearances and 12 for Jack McRae.
fair enough.
And you know what I mean? As I said, like again, it was just clearances that didn't amount to that much. So
Yeah,
it's very hard when I guess to judge it because again, defensively you can see them putting a bit of pressure on. Not enough pressure for how much they weren't winning the ball, but as I said, Jack Steele did put his fair effort into it. But yeah, as I said, it was just structurally off. It was yeah. It was just one of those things where again, inside 50 count even, 59 to 52. Like for that bigger gap, in scoring. It was just far too easy for Adelaide, where St Kilda, yeah, it's hard because, parts were like putting in effort, but when you're like, when you're like watching, I don't know if you've ever watched like Kitchen Nightmares or anything, and I'm
yeah,
just
I
going to
have.
go off a tangent here. But like some of the like restaurants are just like really completely crap.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just like some restaurants that are like, so run down and they're like running a bad system where like they're just putting in a lot of effort to produce crap, and that's sort of a bit sadder with games like this.
Yeah,
And that's very harsh.
a little
But I
rough.
was thinking about Kitchen Nightmares for some reason when I was
I mean,
thinking
if the
about this
analogy
game.
works, it works.
Yeah, well, I was saying, there was effort there, and there could have been more in other areas. But as I said, it was much ado about nothing. So
Yeah, very
yeah,
true.
it just didn't make much of anything.
All right, shall we jump over to our next game?
Yes, and this is a nice segue because this was example where the grit and grind ended up being a very good contest. And, with Port not doing bad, I thought I'd go with the grit and grind Memphis Grizzly era jersey because I thought this game was the match of the round. So I thought, bit of a nod to that. But, I predicted it earlier on. This was going to be a close contest. A lot of these contests have been close before.
Mm-hmm.
But and a lot of them, GWS, I actually saw it. Like the last 4 matches, GWS has won 3 with a percentage of like, I think it's like 73. and Melbourne have won one of the last 3 or 4 matchups with a percentage of 140. So Melbourne thrashed them one time and then lost 3 close ones in a row. But, again, getting into the actual game, as I mentioned, it was close. 11-8, 74 Melbourne to 11-11, 77 GWS. Match of the round, dour grindhouse contest in mixed weather that was made entertaining by some pretty neat conversion at times, as both teams improvised to find ways to score. And in the end, it was GWS able to convert their shots a bit more truly, as Melbourne only scored 1-4 from 11 set shots, compared to their very nice ground ball conversion, 10-2 from 18 general play shots. Again, in wet conditions, a lot of these shots sort of just fell short. So, it was nothing too bad about that. I think the interesting part of this game was the midfield battle in the first half. Clearly dominated by Melbourne, and it was the man you would expect, Christian Petrarca, again causing massive headaches for the for the GWS, trying to find a good matchup to stop him. And yeah, they were just finding a lot of stoppages in forward half play, and they only for the match scored 1-1. Maybe not for the match. Maybe that was defensive half. They only scored 1-1.
Well,
anyway,
in your notes, it only says defensive half, so I would assume it's only defensive half.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure whether that was the first half of the game or not.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, GWSA, very opportunistic and the finishing class of Toby Green and Stephen Cornelia was absolutely fantastic, considering this was a game where both defenses were not allowing any set shot to go. Again, both defenses played pretty fantastically. Like, honestly, it was a very a very flattering scoreline, and it wasn't like flattering because they were playing bad or anything. It was just for both defenses being on fire. 11-8 to 11-11. It was pretty good conversion in the conditions.
Yeah, because it was absolutely dreadful weather. Like there was huge amounts of rain.
It bucketed.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And so
it was greasy in the first half still.
Yeah, like it was still a little bit wet because it had rained like that morning, and overnight. But yeah, like the fact that they were pretty much playing in mixed conditions and still put on like huge amounts of defense, and that wasn't entirely like just defensive slogs. Like there were some good contested marking contests. There was a lot of like spoils and a lot of solid just air pressure as well, from both teams. Was astounding in that weather.
Yeah, and I've mentioned it as well. Like it wasn't just the defense in the back 50. I thought the transitive, transitive defense for both teams was really good. They shut down a lot of play on the wings. The orange tsunami not really being a factor until very late. Again, I think Melbourne were a bit slow to adjust to that heavy rain. I think it lost them the match in a close match, but it's pretty unfair for GWS just to wrap it up like that. But as I said, a lot of the outside play was very good, and I do want to give a special shout out. This is a structural individual performance of Xavier Lindsay, who not only was involved in a good amount of possession chains, forward moving chains, especially as the game progressed, but kept Ward very accountable. Ward wanted to get involved in the game, but especially he did go very well last week, but the young kid, kept enough pressure on him. Had a lot of tackles on the wing as well. I think he recorded 5 or 6 tackles. But yeah, so for a debutant, he's one of the, I think he was the top draft pick from that. I think. Was it Lindsay or Langford? I can never remember. But
I think Langford was higher than Lindsay, I believe.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, he seems like a jet, again, another one of those kids that just played absolutely fantastically.
But I mean, and also, just whilst we're on the topic of debutants, shout out to mature age recruit, Aiden Johnson, who also played in this game. Yeah. Very solid pressure from him. He kicked a nice goal as well. Overall, very solid performance for a mature age.
Yeah, and especially in those conditions, because he does seem like a bit more of a... Honestly, he does look like a very much a local league level player. You know what I mean? Like, well, you know what I mean? Like,
you're not wrong. Again,
hard nut.
mature age.
Like, he's tall. But he plays like an in-between size role where he's not afraid to go for that ground level ball. He laid 5 tackles, a lot of pressure in the forward half. Which again really suited these conditions,
It did.
He scored 1 goal too, but he did also very much a lot of the scores he did get were very creative opportunities. So, as I said, you would more than excuse in this weather the big man not doing all that much. But he did have an impact.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And finally, I will just say, I think one of the big things why GWS win this is when the rain comes, their superiority at ground level, especially the big move by Kingsley. You call it checkmate, putting Toby Green into the midfield honestly turned the tide for them because Melbourne, they'll be very happy with how this game turned out. Their forward line did absolutely well. But at the end of the day, like, they had the midfield battle won. And then they just couldn't quite collect the ball. They were running over it while the while of Toby Green, he was able to collect the ball, move it forward, very involved, probably arguably the best player on ground. As I said, scored 3 goals free. I think one of those goals came late, even when he was still moved to the midfield. So he was just,
believe that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So he was just, dominant all day. And I will say, just, not so much structurally, but just in the poetry of football, and sort of going to how this game, I think it was very poetic that Matt's gone. He dominated Keith all day. It was fair to say. Keith grinded out hard, and in the final bit of play, Max Gorn takes the shot, just falls short. It was fair enough to take it, you know what I mean? Like, probably a marking contest in that weather would have been dropped. So, go for goal. He's got it in him, just fell a bit short. He sprints to the other end of the ground, outpaces Gorn, not the fastest runner in the world. And that hard running to get that space, get open, got in the mark, kicked in the winning goal, and despite being fairly beaten, just gritted and grinded and got that final match winner. Great to see.
Absolutely.
Probably a moment he'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a highlight just for the AFL as a whole, to be honest. It's such because having to take over from Kieran Briggs as the number 1 ruckman, hard enough job on its own, especially when you're matching up against the All Australian ruckman in Max Gawn.
Yeah.
But being able to have that individual moment, it's not just an individual moment; it's a team moment because everyone came to celebrate him when he kicked that sealer.
And it was a nice basket
incredible
play too. Back forward. I think it was coast to coast. I think it was the only coast goal of that match.
Might have been actually.
Yeah. So, yes, I am right. So 0-0 Melbourne from kick in, 1-0-6 from kick in for GWS.
Oh, there you go.
So amazing. And I will say also, just in terms of GWS, he was always fringe player. They delisted him. Worked hard to even get back into the team to be in that position. Like, this was a grindhouse play. So, Lachlan Keith, you win the inaugural grindhouse AFL Coast to Coast trophy. I don't know if we're ever going to give another one out. I don't know if you're ever going to get it in the mail.
I don't know if we're ever going to even remember giving this out.
I will.
We need to make notes of all of these random awards that we keep creating.
Yeah. Anyway, talking about awards, the Blazy individual performances for the week awards.
Yes, sure, let's go with that. Starting off with Lockie Whitfield, he was so important off halfback, finishing with 34 disposals, 26 effective, equating to 76.5% efficiency, which is really high considering the conditions. 10 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 5 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles, 14 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 8 grab ball gets, 3 spoils, and 455 metres gained. Captain Toby Green, as we mentioned before, was all over the ground. He kicked 3-3 from 23 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 5 marks, with 3 of them being inside 50, 5 inside 50s overall, 5 clearances, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements, 4 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 10 ground ball gets, with 4 of them being inside 50, and 472 meters gained. And then Josh Kelly, I thought he did a very good pressure job. He collected 23 disposals, 16 of them effective, equating to 69.6% efficiency. I had to get that one in there. 6 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 3 clearances. He did kick a behind, sadly. 6 score involvements, 10 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and 6 ground ball gets. Also, a brief shout out to Toby Bedford. He collected 35 pressure acts whilst trying to tag Christian Petrarca, which was never going to work. Petrarca's just too big-bodied. He's way too strong. But I wanted to give credit to Bedford for doing a really strong pressure job regardless, because he was pretty much all over him.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, like a lot of GWS players sacrifice their game to put a more defensive effort in. Like even Josh Kelly, who you mentioned before, as I said, you normally, he still plays wing, but you know what I mean? He definitely likes to go into the inside and, do a few things. But like this one was a very disciplined game.
Yeah,
a lot of tackling, a lot of keeping players honest.
If it wasn't for the conditions, I think it would have been a very clinical game from both sides.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? But, this was just an effort. And again, this was 11-8, 74, 77 scoreline. Like, this game had no right to be this. I know it's not a high scoring game, but you know what I mean? All things considered, like, this could have been a 40-42 game.
Yeah.
That's
how crazy it could have been.
Yeah. So, shout out to Kelly for still producing enough while being hard at it.
And then for the Melbourne players, obviously I do highlight Max Gawn. He did dominate the ruck. He got 46 hitouts with 15 to advantage, 24 touches, 14 contested possessions, 3 marks, 5 inside 50s, 7 clearances behind, 10 score involvements, 8 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 4 ground ball gets, and 3 spoils. Clayton Oliver, as I did mention in the preseason, I think it was, because I didn't play last week, he looked back to being pretty much his best. Finished with 25 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 72% efficiency. 16 contested possessions, 5 marks, 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 5 tackles, 27 pressure acts, and 11 ground ball gets. And then Christian Petrarca, of course, I had to mention him specifically. His first game back since his freak injury last season, he performed very well, kicking 2-1 from 27 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 8 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, 8 ground ball gets, with 3 of them being inside 50, and 518 meters gained. And then shout out to Tom McDonald. You did actually add this one, but I worded it slightly better for me. He replaced Stephen May as a late change. May went out with a larynx injury that he suffered in training.
You can only assume it was from shouting at his own players too loudly.
Either that or Jake Lever just got sick of him and punched him in the throat. I don't know.
Maybe the old O'Halpin treatment?
Possibly.
Santana O'Halpin? That's a bit of an old reference for you.
Might be a little old for me because it's not ringing a bell right now. But Tom McDonald did perform well in defensive role, so credit to him. And then you just put in a little bit of a fun fact right here.
Yeah. I actually meant to put this in for myself, but I forgot to mention it. Matthew Jefferson's goal on debut at 15 seconds is the quickest goal on debut on record, previously held by Mitch Brown, scoring at 38 seconds, debuting for Geelong vs Adelaide in 2011. Mitch Brown, hopefully Jefferson has a bit more of a successful career than Mitch Brown. I think he ended up going to Melbourne, actually, now I think about it. Played a couple of underwhelming seasons when they were still struggling.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was... Yeah, also shout out for Emilyn Brees, credit to the boys. I always keep tracks on him, and he was the one who was able to confirm that stat for us. So shout outs to that. Dear supporter, he'll be a bit heartbroken, but we'll love some of the things that went on in that match.
Yes, absolutely. Whilst they may not have gotten the 4 points, it was a very, very strong performance for them regardless. And especially seeing Petrarca back out there. Like, phenomenal.
Oh, for sure.
One of the game's best players. Again, we love it when he's on par.
We mentioned, I think I mentioned, for the last 4 or 5 years, he's been involved in over 30% of their score involvements. And this was another game where he was just, again, so involved. He's such an important player for Melbourne structure. And it's, not even that they're too focused on him or anything. It's just because it's just that good at winning the ball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
On the injury front, I did mention Stephen May was a late change as he injured his larynx. But Brent Daniels, he went hard at the contest in the second quarter,
Mm.
injured his hip. He tried to come back on in the third and just got completely outpaced right off the bat. Called it there, went back onto the bench and took the sub. Hopefully he's okay for next week, for this game coming up this week. But we will find out when the injury lists come out on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was sort of a sad, funny moment again. I think it was after halftime, maybe. It was like,
Uh,
oh, coach, I'm good. Send me
yeah,
in, coach.
yeah, that's right.
Comes on, gets burnt by Petrarca at the first contest, and the coach is like, yeah, maybe you're not good,
Yeah,
son.
you are
Maybe I'll take
done.
a nap. Yeah, so hopefully he comes fit and firing. We know we love Brent Daniels, but that was just an unfortunate moment in his otherwise very fantastic career.
Speaking of unfortunate moments, the game out in
Mm.
the West, the last game of the round, it was not a good sight for the West
Yeah,
Coast Eagles.
look, I'm not sure if this is copium or not, just because Port is currently at the bottom of the ladder. But
Yes, that
I
is
think
true.
the
Let's
Eagles
leave
were
it there. Let's play finals
probably the
now.
worst. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, I mean Richmond's in the eight, so
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
yeah. Yeah. So the Eagles with their 49 points, 7-7, got absolutely obliterated by the Suns. 136 for 2016. 2016, 136, I should say. Sorry, I'm reading weirdly. End of the podcast nearly. Oh, sorry, the wrap ups, I should say. But yeah, so there was some signs early on that this was a contest, but it was really just like last year's Eagles problems with a complete lack of supply for their forwards, troubles turning the ball over in their own back half.
Mhm.
But the Suns just dominated with ease after their shock loss here last year. Absolutely smashing the clearances, smashed the ground level, whilst I will say, whilst the Suns only did have two more actual intercepts than the Eagles, they recorded 14-6 from 57 intercepts, whilst the Eagles only managed 2 goals 5 from 55. So, the Eagles, while they were getting the ball, they weren't really doing that much with it at any stage, really. To the Eagles' credit, maybe, they only had 34 entries, and none of them were particularly piercing. So they did actually, I'll say it again, like they're like the Saints. They worked hard for their 7-7, but it really wasn't enough for me to say that this was actually not, the worst round, the worst loss of the round in context. They were just insipid. The middle game was sort of where the game was completely lost. I'm going to focus on the Eagles here because obviously Blaze is going to mention a few of the individual performances for the Suns. So I'm not trying to take anything away from the Suns. They were absolutely fantastic.
But
But
they were.
I did find it a bit strange that the only player to get more than a single center clearance was Elijah Hewitt, and he only attended 7 bounces or 23% CBA. So it was very weird that they didn't utilize him a bit more. Maybe they're just working him back in, who knows? But yeah, Kelly and Reed, they just really couldn't keep up with it. I only watched the first half. Well, I didn't even watch that. I watched a quarter and a half and then the last 10 minutes or so. And yeah, they were getting absolutely smashed in the middle. I will say Jack Graham from former Tiger,
Mm-hmm.
was putting a lot of pressure on, but he was more of the link up player than possession winner, which they just had none of. Matt Flynn I said it was okay. I really couldn't judge his performance because, he was outclassed in the tap work, which was absolutely fantastic. So, you know, it was okay around the ground, but whether that's better than BJ Williams, who's already a pretty good player around the ground, I'm not really sure if this is like a step up. You know what I mean? Like to me, if they're not going to run both, they sort of just brought Flynn in to do sort of the same thing. If this was, he had one game, so I'm not going to judge him. But
Yeah.
yeah, as I said, not quite the ruck movement they were looking for. Again, you're probably going to talk about all these players, but Rao, Witts, Anderson, Miller, Humphreys, all dominated. The Suns scored 3-2 from centre bounce and would have scored more from stoppages, but then that was where they were most inaccurate. 5-9 from general stoppages. But you can see that was a clear area of domination for them. So if I can do math, that is 8-11 from just overall stoppage work.
Oh, yeah.
Centres included. 19 marks inside 50. It was the highest of the round. Ben King, 8 marks inside 50, also highest of the round. As poor Harry Edwards, he actually didn't lose the 3 1-on-1 contests that he faced. Just had no help. McGovern, he only had 1 intercept night, a mark of the day, because again, as we mentioned, with Barras coming out, he was playing a more defensive, strict role on Ethan Reid, who I thought as a kid had an absolutely fantastic day out. And Cole was really the only interceptor, but that was a bit higher up the ground with 8. So, we're talking about a defense that the one good thing last year was their ability to cover, lose their man. Sorry, not lose their man, but come off their man to try and aggressively generate intercepts. But that just seems stripped this year.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot's going to be said about Minnie's first game, Andrew McQualter, but I really don't see how this defense is meant to operate. It's just so thin, and it's just such a big gap. And I know that they've got the ability when they do move the ball forward, but as I said, their midfield's just so bad.
Yeah, it's not a pretty sign. It doesn't help that Elliot Yeo is injured again.
Yeah, and it's just how are they going to get that ball forward is the question. As I said, there were some with Jack Graham and Liam Baker.
Yes.
But yeah, as I said, it was just purely outclassed, really.
Yeah, it was just way too much from Gold Coast coming through. And I didn't mention him in my individual performances, but Took Miller, absolutely blinder of a game.
Yeah. Hopefully he's actually, that's more of his standard performance, as he did struggle with injury last year.
He did.
Hopefully he can continue on to other teams that may have defensive midfielders.
Speaking of individual performances, sorry, I will jump onto that. Starting with newly appointed captain Noah Anderson. On his first outing as captain, he was incredible in the midfield, as he normally is, alongside Matt Rowell. Finishing with 36 disposals, 24 of them effective, equating to 66.7% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 9 clearances, 3 goal assists, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 13 pressure acts, 8 grab ball gets, and 723 metres gained. Key forward Ben King put himself in front for the Coleman medal. I'm pretty sure at the overall tally, including last week's games, he is in front. Kicking 6-2 from 11 touches, 8 of them being effective at 72.7% efficiency. 4 contested possessions, 8 marks with all of them inside 50, as you mentioned, and 9 score involvements. Not to mention, he might have also taken Mark of the Week, which might end up being a Mark of the Year contender.
Yeah, it was Bobby Hill's mark. Just he's a bigger boy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Not quite as much aerial leap, but same sort of style.
He spent a lot of time off the ground in that mark, so it's very impressive. He kept his balance for the most part. And then Ruck Jared Witts. I did mention this before that I was going to talk about the highest hit out number of the week, and Jared Witts got it. Yeah. He completely dominated the ruck work. He collected 68 hit outs, needed 1 more to be special. But 17 of them to advantage, 13 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 8 score involvements, 4 tackles, and 11 pressure acts. And then just to highlight a couple of players we have technically already mentioned. But former Tiger, the Fridge, Jack Graham, was back to his pressure best, finishing with 23 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 87% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, 10 tackles, 26 pressure acts, 5 ground ball gets, and 401 metres gained. And Jeremy McGovern, as he normally does, did the best that he could down back, collecting 19 disposals, 14 of them effective, equating to 73.7% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 9 1%ers, 9 spoils, and 426 metres gained.
I think I also want to give a shout out because, again, I didn't watch enough of this game. I only watched bits to confirm that was probably up there. But Britton Gibney, again, playing defensive role, again, wasn't too bad, all that things considering.
No, I do agree. He had some fairly commendable stats despite the game that occurred.
Yeah, and good playing efforts too. It's just, yeah, as I said, it's rancid up the ground. Like again, yeah, maybe they're not a big enough backline. Like they've got players that are solid. Like I still believe in the core that they're building, like a bit more than midfield even. But it's just not ready at this moment to play, you know, league defense really.
Yeah.
And then as they compound that to their midfield, which is just again bad. So, you know, Harley Reid had an absolutely stinker of a match, unfortunately. So,
did.
you know, they weren't even getting a bit of buzz from him. So it was just, yeah, pretty disappointing all around.
Yeah, it definitely was not a very good game for the Eagles at all. But on the Suns front, I want to shout out a couple of their backline members, being Dan Rioli, new recruit, and Sam Collins. They both look like they're gelling really well together in that defensive lineup. Shout out to Rioli specifically because he did kick 2 goals. Something that, you know, whilst he didn't really get to do it all that much at the Tigers when he moved to halfback, it's good to see that he can still kick and he's still very accurate.
I think, you know, because Gold Coast tend to run off intercept. I think that's where, again, that matchup's pretty good for him because, again, he's so aggressive. So for that fast back row, he likes running up. So,
he does.
The Suns might actually utilize that even a bit more than the Tigers. Maybe not in their good years, but especially in their, what do you call it, their middling stages, we're able to.
Yeah, for sure. And then, unfortunately, on the injury front, Jake Waterman was subbed out with a calf concern. He did go into the game with said concern. They were just hoping it wouldn't flare up or anything like that, but unfortunately, he did have to get subbed out. Liam Duggan went out with an ankle concern as well. And Charlie Ballard, he landed awkwardly and seemed to put some rough pressure onto his knee. It was very innocuous. Like, there was no other player involved. He was just taking a mark, landed awkwardly. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, he's going to be out for possibly at least 2 weeks.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I must have been mishearing. I thought he was actually fine, but that might have been another player. Yeah, okay. Sad. I like Ballard.
Yeah, I know you do. Which is very unfortunate for him because he's been a great player for the past couple of years. 2 years. How long has he been in the system?
So I'll say he just gels. I mean, he's been around for a while, but like he's 28, I think now. But yeah, as I said, he's just one of those players that you know, he's not the main defender. He'll always be second fiddle to former Docker player.
There's a
You
couple.
mentioned him before.
Did I mention him before?
Yeah.
Collins. Yes, that's right, Sam Collins. I forgot he was a Docker, I'll be honest.
Yeah, played more time for Peel. Dockers never really utilised him. They just moved on to different people. But yeah, as I said, found a good place at their Suns. But yeah, talking about former Dockers, also, I was going to see Lockie Weller do all right in the forward line as well.
Lockie Weller did have a great game. So did Ben Long. Ben Long was sort of improved from his performances last season, which is also good to see for that forward line.
I was going to say, he had a pretty good last season too.
I mean, he did, but like it wasn't as consistent as we would have hoped, you know, for that forward line. But that forward line did have some.
They ask him to do. Again, he's a small player that plays as a tall. You know, I think he gets that awkward stats where it depends who you compare him to. Because if you compare him to the small forwards, he looks, you know, a bit worse. If you compare him to the talls, he doesn't have the marking stats to stand out.
Yeah.
But if you look at his output, you know, it's pretty good. I don't know if he's an underrated player. He gets a bit of props on the Gold Coast, but yeah, as I said, but yeah, in terms of the smalls, like they're very much looking towards players like Jake Rogers.
Yes, who also had a great game.
Played an absolutely fantastic game. There were a lot of Gold Coast forwards that like this game.
They were. This was a really good. This was a really good game to show off some of their younger talent. Granted, you know, it was against West Coast. Which, unfortunately, I tipped them. I thought that maybe they would have had a better showing. But yeah, this was. I took the risk. Okay, I wasn't the only one. I did see someone else tip them. I wasn't the only one. But yeah, unfortunately for them, the Suns just ran away with it right off the bat, pretty much.
Oh, well, makes me feel less bad about Melbourne not getting the win over G-Dubs. That was pretty.
Yeah, look, I got five. I've got 5 correct this week. You only got 6. We're only one off somewhere.
Yeah, Oh, I got 6, did I?
Yes, you did. I checked.
Awesome.
All right. Before we move on to our previews for round 2, let's jump over to the MRO. I'll go through these pretty quickly. So Tom Lynch was suspended for 1 match for rough conduct against Tom de Koning. They are challenging that, I believe, today as we're recording this. Adam Chera was fined $3,125 for careless contact with an umpire. Jack Scrimshaw has been suspended for 3 matches for striking Jordan Ridley. They are challenging that as well. Mason Redman is fined $1,000 for careless contact with an umpire. There's a couple of these, by the way. Sam Frost is fined $1,000 for striking Ben Hobbs. Jaeger Mira is fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Ollie Dempsey, and Harris Andrews is fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Ollie Florent. There was a lot in that Sydney game for some reason. I don't know why. Justin McInerney, this is a big one because he's fined $6,865 and suspended for 3 matches for rough conduct against Jared Berry, tripping Noah Answorth. That's where the money comes in. And then the rough conduct on Brandon Starcevich, the one that resulted in the bad head injury. He accepted the 3 matches. He accepted he was completely in the wrong in that contest.
And
so
and we
he
should
went,
clarify
he
3
and
separate
because
incidents as well.
I believe Brisbane.
He didn't do it like all in one go.
Yeah, so and I believe Sydney have the bye this week. I think it's either this week or next week. So either way, he misses technically like 4 games. Technically,
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing for him, especially with Sydney struggling at the moment. A very tool-like player fills in a lot of gaps, but they'll be looking for the outside to try and fill him in.
yes. James Jordan was fined $1,875 for careless contact with an umpire. Darcy Ford is fined $2,000 for striking Braden Campbell. Sure, I didn't say it, but sure. Willem Drew is fined $3,750 for careless contact with an umpire twice. You're like, how do you not see the umpires? They're right there in like what bright blue, bright green. They're very obvious to see. Surely that's not that hard.
He was tagging Nick Dacos. Nick Dacos is sort of like an umpire.
True. Jackson Archer has been suspended for 3 matches for rough conduct against Luke Cleary. They are challenging that. I don't know what specifically they're challenging about it, but apparently they're challenging it. Maybe they're going to say he was pushed into the context, which I think might have been the case. It was definitely the case on the Tom Lynch one.
Again, I've only briefly looked at that, but it sort of just seemed like, they'll argue that sort of contest is unavoidable. But yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where it'll be a tone setter for those sort of incidents.
Yeah, like the all the fines and the suspensions and stuff are early setters for what could happen later in the season.
Yeah, I honestly think everything else will stay. That will be the most interesting one, Jackson Archer. I know you think, it's a fair enough thing that Wiedering did push Tom Lynch into the contest, and I do agree on that. But I still think just because he left the ground, like that's 2 separate processes.
Yeah, it's 2 separate actions, so it might.
I think just
might
because he left the ground and he made that, I think they will upstand. But you do have a point. Or it's technically weird because they said they were going to pushing into the marking contest and all that. Like, could we get an incident where you've sort of pushed another player where you can get like a dual suspension? Wiedering for pushing into a marking contest and Tom Lynch for jumping up and knocking someone out.
It'll be interesting to see what happens out of that one. And then Sunday's MRO reports did come in as pretty much 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to quickly run through those as well. Jack McRae is fined twice for careless contact with an umpire. He's fined $2,000 overall. Clayton Oliver is fined for tripping Lockie Whitfield, so he accepts a $2,000 fine. Aiden Johnson is suspended for 1 match for rough conduct against Callum Brown. I assume he's probably just going to let that stand. I don't know when this happened. Apparently it happened in the 4th quarter. I don't know how bad it was, but it's wet conditions. Surely there would have been some sort of misunderstanding there.
I don't know. Well, I'd have to see it.
We would have to see it. And then there's a fair few out of the West Coast Gold Coast game. So Took Biller, also careless contact with an umpire, fined $1,000. Tim Kelly, same thing, fined $1,875. Matt Rowell, same thing, $1,875 as well. Jack Graham, same thing, fined $1,000. Bailey Humphrey is accepting a $2,000 fine for striking Harry Edwards. And Jake Rogers is fined $2,000 for tripping Ruben Gindy.
Yeah.
And-
So, out of all this, and I hope this is the case, umpires end of season trip looking pretty well funded.
Yeah, I know. Looks like they're going to Europe with all of those.
I hope they do get some money out of it. You know what I mean? Like I said,
I'm pretty sure
umpires,
all the money just goes into like the team budgets for next year. I feel like, or something like that.
It all goes back into the system, but they get a bit. It's hard being an umpire, and the AFL keeps on changing the rules, so there's a bit. I can only talk too much about it, but the 15-meter kick, I still maintain that I'd rather a 20-meter kick be called 15-meter. Oh, sorry, a 10-meter kick be called 15 meters than a 20-meter kick called not 15. It's it didn't decide any games, but it was a bit at times, especially in defense. So yeah. But shall we look on to next week and the matchups that are occurring?
We shall. Before we jump on just straight up to Thursday's game, I do want to quickly mention again that if you weren't here for the start of the stream or missed it at the start of the recording, Sarek and I will be at the Port Adelaide versus Richmond match at Adelaide Oval on Saturday. We're both making the trip over. He's from WA, I'm from Melbourne. We're both looking forward to it. It's because we haven't been to a game together since 2019, which is super, super exciting. And we'll take lots of photos. I'm considering making like a little vlog about the entire weekend, considering I'm also doing TGX on the Sunday. If you're in Melbourne, please come along. Come see the Marvel Rivals tournament that I'm working on. It's going to be very, very cool. Yeah.
If I have a phone,
if you have a phone,
will probably also take photos. My phone just did die last night. It was on its last legs anyway, so I'll have to nip in, get a new phone. Hopefully that's all working. So we'll try our best. We'll keep it involved. We'll do something special.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Richmond v Brisbane's round 4, isn't it? I'm looking forward to that too. That's a home game.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was mentioned. It was mentioned in chat, so I figured I would mention. I will be there.
Okay.
I'm also going to next week's game, Richmond, St Kilda v Richmond at Marvel. So I've got 4 Richmond games in a row. It's great. So glad footy is back.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump into the matches. Carlton versus Hawthorn, Thursday night blockbuster at the MCG.
Wow. As I said, if it's almost a bit of a double whammy, isn't it? You cough one up against Richmond, and then you go into the undefeated team that's looking pretty on the nose. Again, I think this one will be a bit more interesting to see how Carlton adapt at ground level, because it was still a bit iffy last week, and I think again that's where you probably want to be looking to try and beat Hawthorn. So you know what I mean. I think I think it might be a bit of tough going for Carlton, to be honest. Honestly, I'll probably tip that Hawthorn with a bit more margin than I did Carlton against Richmond.
Yeah, I'm expecting Hawthorn to absolutely stomp them, essentially.
Well, you're going for the absolute stomping.
I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to be like a 90-point decimation like it was Gold Coast West Coast, but I think it's going to be a big margin.
Carlton's defense was pretty bad last week too, so Hawthorn do look for ways. Like again, not the most potent forward line ever, but you give them an opportunity, they're probably going to take it. So
and their midfield is also fairly proficient in goal kicking as well, so it's
exactly
not something to
and that makes it hard to defend.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you've got goal kicking midfielders, they suck in late. So even if you do defend down the ground very well, you can open up that space.
Yeah.
Forward of the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of Carlton, what can they do to try and either improve from last week or actually try and get the win? I think again, first of all, getting that ground level play a tiny bit better will be the biggest start. And maybe even getting some of that transition, because again, I don't think a few outside players for Carlton didn't do all that well, but against Hawthorn, they're probably bigger and better bodies matched up. So if they can, pick up a bit from last week, get a bit of movement from the wing, connect that to their back line, maybe they can, from transition, get a few more goals. Maybe try and strong arm them, trying to get this into a forward half game for Carlton. But yeah, as I said, I think that's a bit too speculative. I would back in Hawthorn with a reasonable amount of confidence.
Yeah, I am backing Hawthorn here fairly considerably. All right, Friday night clash at the MCG. The Western Bulldogs 100th, the Centennial game, as they're calling it. They're also renaming themselves back to Footscray for this game. Versus Collingwood. Honestly, I think this is a pretty interesting matchup.
I think Collingwood will comfortably win this, but
I mean, so do I think
it's putting a bit less credit on how good some of the young players were for the Bulldogs. And again, I'll have to look at the ins and outs because, they might get a few players back. I haven't looked at the injuries in terms of in context of this week, but with a few players looking to be out, I think the Bulldogs would have to comfortably win the midfield battle again, and B, I think, Collingwood's defense would have to give up a bit because again, they're still very short in their forward line. Collingwood's defense did look to be a lot more solid. Again, they fell short to GWS, but again, that was once they sort of got tucked out basically. Got very tired in that GWS, gave a lot of score late. So I think overall, I like Collingwood's structure a bit more to win this game, but I'm not sure if this is going to be, again, an untangling game for the Bulldogs. I just don't think they'll have enough stock to win this one.
Yeah, I think if we're going also based on Collingwood's performance last week, I think they've figured out a balance between how to use their age to a benefit, especially with them having Pendles start as a sub in some cases. Being able to just use his energy and his strength and speed a little bit more sparingly, rather than trying to make him do like the text method of just playing only half of a forward game, whereas Pendles might be better at playing half of a back game instead.
Yeah, well, it's such a good ball user still, and again, like it's not fast, but you know what I mean. It's like his best body mover, best evasion in the competition.
Exactly.
I reckon he would go well on Dancing with the Stars if he ever wanted to sell out a bit.
There's a possible chance.
I don't know if that's still on, to be honest, but
it is. Sadly,
just an idea.
Sadly, it is.
Okay.
And then,
well, if you're listening, keep it in mind.
If you're listening, it's our idea. Like we take it first.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're both going Collingwood on that one. Thankfully, this Saturday there are only 3 games rather than 4, as the Gold Coast Suns and the GWS Giants get the bye this week. So good for them. So our first up on the Saturday matches is Essendon and Collingwood at the MCG. No, Collingwood.
Adelaide.
Sorry, Adelaide.
Yeah, I was going to say, can't even say South Australian Adelaide, Collingwood, because that's Port.
Yes, it is Port.
Yeah. Again, very close games last year, and it was 1 each by memory, I think.
I believe it was 1-1.
One was the Draper running onto the ball, and the other one was Adelaide getting a few goals ahead.
Yes, that is correct.
Again, Adelaide looking a bit better structured. I think, again, midfield battle, I could see Essendon getting on top. And, again, with repeat entries, we did say that Adelaide are a bit taller than they are at ground level. So I can see Essendon getting their forward game going. But, again, it's hard to back them in when their defense is just going to be exposed. Like, it wouldn't take too much of Adelaide's. It could be another game where Essendon win the inside 50 count and just get outscored.
Yes, absolutely possible.
Sort of game where that goes, similar to the Hawthorn game. But, again, if Essendon are lively enough at ground level, again, we rate Adelaide's defense, but they are tall more than they are flexible. So, Some important players like for Adelaide, Muckalani and Hinge will be very important players in the
Mhm.
back line. Whereas Essendon, they've just got to prey on Redley for a start, and then hopefully Ben Mackay, can either take one of probably more likely to go on Phil Thorpe, but may go on Fogarty. Fogarty will probably get like a medium defender, probably Ridley if he's fit.
Yeah, Ridley's fit. There's a
Um,
fair chance that Fogs will get Ridley.
yeah, but yeah, as I said, it's just ooh. Yeah, Adelaide's forward conversion is probably going to be too much, and I didn't talk about that before, but Ben Mackay, yeah, he's not really on paper. I wouldn't put him in like the top tier one-on-one defenders anymore. He's
No,
slipped
he's not
down
really worth being the
what
$1
played
million
for
man
Essendon.
right now, is he?
I don't really care about $1 million man. It's just, he is the center point of Essendon's defense. And, you go out to get him. But, whether it's just the structure doesn't allow him to be good or, play as much, or whether it's just, a bit of form drop off. Yeah, he has been a bit exposed with his time at Essendon. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think Phil Thorpe will take advantage of that. And I think Adelaide will probably win by maybe 4 or 5 goals.
Yeah, I could definitely lean towards that. I think just based on what they showed us last week, they look phenomenal, and
Yeah,
I think they'll probably just tear Essendon apart, maybe a bit.
yeah.
All right, our
How do you
clash.
reckon for back to back, Blazy?
Honestly, granted it's a small sample size, but I'm very happy with what I saw. And considering your performance on the MCG,
Yeah,
there's a it's not looking
I
great
mean, I'm
for
still
Port
going on
Adelaide at the
sample
moment.
size, but for the other fact, I'm like, oh, I'm sample size of 1. Can't be as bad. Get it? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it
I mean,
honestly, I think it part of it is going to depend on your ins and outs. What changes is Ken Hinkley going to make?
I think it's probably just going to be Sava and maybe dropping someone like Lockie Jones, who didn't really have much of a game last week. But I think it'll be more in the back half. I don't really think we've got much flexibility in the forward. Midfield just normally stays the same. We're not going to get batters back. That's confirmed. Well,
Yeah,
that's going to be just. So, yeah, honestly, it's really just how much possession we get from the midfield. If we can turn it into a forward half game, we still should outscore Richmond, and we do tend to do good against. I don't want to say bad defenses because again, I don't think Richmond are. It's just if we get a lot of more general play our way, which Richmond do allow, Port tend to be good. So yeah, as I said,
my
I was still back in Port to come back, but yeah,
my
it
big
might just be a
concern will
win.
be if Lynch gets off or not. If we don't have Lynch, we don't have a tall forward. Like,
I wouldn't worry too
Kaczynski
much.
isn't exactly what we want him to be. We could put in Samson Ryan, which I'm
Yeah,
a fan of Samson Ryan, but he's not consistent enough.
yeah,
Um, and our other like big boys aren't ready essentially. So
yeah. Well,
options are limited.
Port are probably going to play too tall. I'm actually got a hunch, that Asava will come back this week. Because honestly, if Finlayson can't win the one-on-one contest, I think you just have to go for his athleticism. I don't know whether we keep Finlayson as like a second ruck options or whatever, but I do think we might be pushing even with the smaller forward line of Richmond, still putting a Sava in. So
Well,
again, it'll probably be a Sava and Aaliyah.
I checked the forecast. Sadly, Saturday is going to be sunny, whereas Sunday is meant to be rainy and wet. So if they can change that, then maybe Richmond will have a better chance.
Perfect per football. I love a good 30-day. Not for much
It
for playing,
it is.
but
It's pretty good weather actually. But yeah, look, I want to hope
yeah.
that we can go 2-2. But it's gonna be dependent on Tom Lynch for me for the most part. Otherwise, yeah, I'll swing probably Port Adelaide with the tip. All
Yeah,
right.
we'll just need to get it done.
Do we just call it as a Geelong Frelo win right here? I mean, it is at
Yes.
Marvel, but St Kilda just don't look good.
Yeah, St Kilda's defense looks in a disarray, and Geelong's forward line look very, very terrific. So obvious matchup pains. Again, Geelong's midfield. If you give them an opportunity, they tend to convert. Saints midfield, they can get possessions, but they don't look that restrictive so far. They can be. Last year they weren't too bad, but yeah, it's not too much that I would want to say. I think this is probably one of the more. Oh, I can't say it's the widest gap because the next match we're going to talk about is Brisbane West Coast, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. I think it'll definitely be a closer match than Brisbane West Coast.
I think so.
But I think
really
Geelong are just going to be far and away the much, much better team.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, pretty much free Geelong chip on that one. So we'll move over to the Sunday matches. Brisbane and West Coast. Pretty much the same thing we kind of just said.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Brisbane takes advantage of West Coast defense. Because again, they were forced for a bit higher up. It might be a game where they want players like not Jackson Payne, busy young forward.
Logan Morris.
Logan Morris from last year. Hell, maybe Darcy Fort might be revving the engines, ready to go. If he gets another game.
Well, if Jake Waterman doesn't play, you only have Oscar Allen as a forward, a main forward option, and he's Brisbane's defense will shut him down pretty convincingly.
Oh man, Starcevic is out. I think they're
true. Starcevic is out.
Yeah. But what I mean is their small forwards can convert a bit more. I don't think they need it. And Allen actually did pretty good. I thought, who was on him? I can't remember. I think because it was originally Ballard, and then the person who came in, I think. Oh, they put a younger.
That was Alex Sexton, who was the sub.
Yeah, but it wasn't Sexton. Anyway, I think Hoff might have. Not Hoff. The what?
Cole.
Oh, what's his name? No, for the Suns.
Harry. Oh, for the Suns. Oh yeah.
Hewland.
Yes. Brody Hewland. Sorry, Brody Hewland. Yeah. Right. I forgot he was playing, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Oscar Allen did quite well being reasonably held. So I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. It's just, again, getting supply when Brisbane are a supply drying upside, and that normally happens in the midfield. Honestly, probably one of the worst matchups on paper. I would be interested to see if this margin would be as big as you would sort of expect it to be.
Yes. I mean, you expected a blowout, but who knows if it's going to be a massive blowout or if it's going to be a minor blowout.
Well, I don't hope it's a blowout, but I just can't see how it couldn't be.
Yeah, especially, it depends. To be fair, Brisbane ended up winning that game anyway, but it could depend on if the Eagles try to develop more of a tagging sort of play style, because that's what happened to Lachie Neale last week. He just got tagged really hard, and that's why he was so quiet.
So what avail though?
Yeah, because when you have Dunkley, you've got McCluggage, who I can't remember if he played or not, but you have all of these insane other midfielders that they have. Anyway, Brisbane tip. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
North Melbourne.
North Melbourne and Melbourne at Marvel. Honestly, this could be close, and I only say that because I like North's improvement. But Melbourne look, granted it was wet conditions, they look great, but I want to see how they play in dry conditions.
Well, honestly, it was dry enough in the first half, but I think it's actually more North Melbourne up against what still should be a top 8 defense in the league. How they'll actually convert? Will it dry up like it did last year? And this is what I was saying, why some of this effort has to be in the context over a couple of games, because, again, they won't give you all the looks you want, Melbourne. They're very good at shutting down your best forward options. So they're going to have to work out. Again, some of the ground players will be more important. I really think that Luke Parker should see some forward time in this match. And as well, I know Curtis Taylor, or whichever the one that scored three goals.
Paul Curtis.
That was all in the last half. Last quarter, I should say. So, you do want him buzzing around in, throughout the whole game for them to score well. But yeah, I'm not thinking Larkies are good. Sorry, not Curtis Taylor, Paul Curtis.
That's what. Yeah, I did follow you up on that.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think Lucky's going to kick 5. Hopefully, if he kicks a couple and they get enough on the ground, they'll post a competitive score. And again, if Melbourne just find those goals, like they did against GWS, I think they should be in fairly good stead. If it was purely form from their previous match, I'll go Melbourne for a mile, but I think there will be a bit of adjustment. I think this will be in the realms of sort of game. I think I'm comfortable in the fact that Melbourne should win it, but it'll be enough. I think North should chase spirit. I think.
You'd like to hope so. I think the veteran talent they now have will definitely help in that regard, in like raising their spirit levels, raising their energy levels, I guess, raising their morale. But it'll be who knows what kind of outfit Melbourne will put on.
Yeah, and again, getting that win against a quality opposition, because again, last year, sorry to say, obviously it was just Richmond and Gold Coast who were playing pretty putridly at that point in the season. So, yeah, as I said, if they can actually get a win, like that'll be a pretty big achievement. So, I'm not sure if we'll be against Melbourne, but it's one of the ones that they'll be looking to win some point in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we're both pretty much leaning Melbourne for the tip in that regard. And then the last game of the round, Freo and Sydney at Optus.
I'm not really, because last time Fremantle really did put Sydney away, but Sydney had some horrid. Oh, maybe no, sorry, it was the opposite way. The one at Optus was Freo just couldn't convert. But we're still in general play, and obviously then Fremantle did beat them in that classic game from last year. As I said, Sydney's not so restrictive in outside ball movement so far, so that should go in Fremantle's favour. I would probably, depending on the team lineup, lean towards them a bit more. I think both teams would want to see their forward line functioning a bit more and getting more out of it. Obviously, it was just the one match for Fremantle, but they would like to see Jai Amos and Tracy get into the game. Again, probably hoping for Bolton as well to try and get some ground level stuff. Whereas Sydney, again, their avenue is probably going to be from stoppage, because I mentioned before, especially if Hayden Young's not back, Freo can leak a lot of goals from not their main stoppages. So, when they got all their good players, they normally win a stoppage. Maybe they'll turn it over, but it's still moving the ball forward. But, they still have some matchups where it's not looking that great. Fife apparently did really well in the Peel Reserves match. Not Peel Reserves. Peel practice match.
Was he playing mostly just to get match fit?
Yeah, he just had a half of football. And a few Freo players did as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think the other player on the fringe would have been Neil Erasmus.
Oh, yes.
So, but again, that was just a practice match. So, it'd just be interesting to see. But yeah, I think there are avenues to where I could see Sydney winning, but I'm still probably going to edge towards Freo. But yeah, it's going to be hard for Sydney. 3 tough matches to start the year, and definitely could go 0-3. It's in the realms of possibility.
Yeah, it is. In my point of view, I am more leaning towards ins and outs in terms of Sydney, at least. But I think for the most part, I'm definitely just going to swing towards Fremantle. Mostly because of tip, mostly because on form. I think Freo again looks solid for the most part. But yeah, it honestly this could be a coin flip game. It'll just be dependent on what kind of Sydney shows up really, and what kind of Freo shows up actually. Speaking of,
Yeah, I know. It's so hard in these early season with the small sample size.
yeah, absolutely. And then for the buys, it's the Gold Coast Suns and the GWS Giants. Yeah, I know because of opening round they get a buy so early. It's weird. It's why we don't like the round.
Oh yeah,
But
Suns especially shafted going from no game
to
to
a blowout
game to
game.
no game.
Yeah, it's not good for their
Yeah,
form, but I might actually just take a
yeah.
quick jump ahead to round 3 just to see who they're playing. They're playing Melbourne at the MCG
Melbourne, yeah.
next week. So that's
a tough assignment.
a doozy of a matchup.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll see. But hopefully, again, it won't screw up with them in terms of logistics wise, because you don't want to see it. Like, yeah, I feel like it's hard to prove anything because it's only been running a couple of years, but opening round just feels a bit screwy in terms of, teams coming in, playing teams that haven't played. I really just would like to see opening round, fresh team against fresh team, like it should be.
Yeah.
Again,
Agreed.
that's preaching to the choir.
Yeah, we get that they want to try and capitalize on just on an appeal to New South Wales and Queensland. But when you play it in the middle of a Queensland summer and there is a potential cyclone, and this could happen every year. That's the scary part of the Queensland tropical summers. But
honestly, I think just early season Queensland games are crap.
Well, that too. The weather is always
honest,
too hot or horrible.
I just think the Gabba should be banned until winter. But,
I don't think Queensland fans will be a big fan of that.
No. But yeah.
As someone who has been to the Gabba in the past 8 months, hang on, when did I last go up there? I think it was July or August. Yeah, it's a nice venue. It's just Queensland's too hot.
True that.
But yeah, that will do us for episode 50 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast. We look forward to sharing with you our adventure in Adelaide. For me, it'll basically be about 24 hours. For Sarek, it'll be a couple of days. We will take photos and share some stuff from our trip over there. I might take little videos of like just opinions of each quarter from each other that I can just insert into next week's episode. Yeah. We'll see.
A few stories, hopefully.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to it. But in any case, thank you all so much for coming to listen, coming to watch, coming to check us out. Thank you to my stream for coming to hang out with us. I appreciated all the interactions. I am going to continue streaming after we stop recording here, so don't stress. But for the YouTube and Spotify listeners, thank you all so much. I will, on the socials posts for this week, I will pretty much just share the secret publicly if you didn't catch it here on the stream, so you don't have to worry about that. Or in the video recording, etc. We've been recording for 3 hours. I'm tired. Okay, I'm running out of words.
Back into it.
Yeah, it's back into the swing of things, that's for sure. But yes, thank you all so much. Again, if you're interested in checking me out, again, I post mostly on Instagram and Twitter. If you're interested in what social stuff I get up to, especially announcements and things are based on TGX and the Marvel Rivals tournament at TGX. I'm so looking forward to that. Otherwise, I'm trying to stream at least 3 days a week on my Twitch, such as tonight, like I'm doing right now. So please go check that out if you haven't already as well. Check out podcast socials. I post every week for our socials post, but I'm trying to do a little bit more. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not very good at it. Neither is Sarek. It just is what it is.
It is. Maybe new phone will turn over a new leaf for me.
We might turn over a new socials leaf. We will see. But until then, thank you all so much. And we will see you all next week for episode 51. So I wish you all well and take care. Goodbye.